Calling to order North Shore District 112 Reconfiguration 2.0 committee meeting on May 31st, 2017. Can I get a roll call?
All right, Ronnie.
Yes.
Julie. Lyra. Here. Megan. Jory.
Here.
Shannon. Rocky.
Here.
Alyssa.
Here.
Ivan.
Here.
Raphael.
Here.
Mark L.
Here.
Carol L. Darren.
Here.
Jeff.
Jeff. Here.
Okay. Ann.
Here.
Dan R.
Here.
David. Helen.
Here.
Ronald.
Here.
Mark M. Mark F.
Here.
Carol G. Brian. Rick.
Here.
Dan.
Here.
Lori.
Here.
Becky. And Gary Forum.
Thank you.
So this will have no.
Can I get a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. I am sure you all reviewed the minutes and noticed if John Springer's took anything interesting into them.
That was the one before.
They missed it. Go back a week. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes for our meeting on May 24th, 2017?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right. Is there anyone who'd like to make another comment? No. No one is here. I don't have any comments to make either, so I want to hand it over to Dan and Don for a review of our current cost projections, and then we're going to move into executive session.
So I'll just kind of give a quick intro. What you got, I just handed to you is there's summary notes from the cost reduction effort that were taking place last week. We have the raw data. This is just kind of crunched together a little bit. So I'll share the raw data if that's not been out. I think it already was, but if it hasn't, I'll get that out. No, Dan didn't share that, sorry. I'll share this summary document with you as well. I'll kind of just put the themes together. But what it does have on the top of that, and this is what Dan's going to go through, the blue section is really what we're going to focus on tonight, at least in the first 15, 20 minutes for him to present it. Those are kind of group themes. So the committee kind of asked our professionals to say, kind of what would you look at from the outside? How would you take a look at this? And that's what this blue kind of represents. Many of these blue items are in the data below it, in the red and black numbers. Just for clarification, the red or the black is the point that was brought up by the committee. The red are just some notes from Nagel Hartrade. Yes. So that's what the black and red represent. But we aren't going to go through those are a little more focused, a little more detailed. We're not doing that right away tonight. We're focusing more on the top and the blue to try to look at global application of reduction ideas. With that, I'll be quiet and I'll let Dan kind of do those.
Okay, so basically the idea was to kind of give an outside opinion on what would make the most sense to be most efficient with construction, and also try to look at items that could also be incorporated one way or the other, and not leave out the major scope. So we're putting together numbers on this afternoon, so we don't have it on all the different models, but we did get like a full representation of that on model number 6. So I'll kind of try and share some of the approximate numbers of how those things are coming in. And as far as the numbers go, some of them have overlaps and things like that. So that's why, until we get into the very detailed, here's exactly what we're going to do, we can refine them more. But just to go through the different items. So as far as the admin spaces, this was one thing that, it seemed like it was coming up over and over that people don't want to put money into the admin spaces. So the idea with this is, after going through some of the different options, is Green Bay could be used as is with, there would be no renovations associated with it for admin and early childhood. That's a potential option because if you look at a lot of the different programs with the different models, the admin kind of didn't fit at the different schools where it was shown. So that was an idea there, or just doing minimal amounts of work to kind of get a little bit of the scope, but the admin kind of not being part of the referendum projects. So as far as that goes, we just looked at if we said there's going to be zero work associated with admin at in model number 6, admin at Indian Trail, which was an addition, a full addition, and then at Wayne Thomas, which was part of a renovation. So we just took out that square footage and said that's not going to be remodeled at all. We won't touch it. So looking at that, you could be in the range of, this is probably one of the higher ones because it does have the full addition for admin, but you're around, it could be 12 to 14 million just for that portion. If you said we're not going to touch anything associated with admin or early childhood education because it's going to stay here, but then you have to figure out the rest of the schools and how that all fits in. So, and then you have an extra building as well in model number 6 because Green Bay wasn't part of that. So moving on to the next one, another thing that I kind of heard was, Oak Terrace is one of our newer buildings. Why are we doing so much work in it? So this would be pulling out Oak Terrace, besides just adding a few walls, doing a little bit of interior work. Our interior work, looking at the estimate for just making those walls and making the program work was approximately $1.5 million. So if we take out all the scope except for that $1.5 million associated with Green Bay on model number 6, you're around $9 million to beat up from that model number 6. So another significant removal of cost. The next one is where you're kind of getting rid of scope. So you wouldn't get certain areas of school. So, ultimately we were saying there's a 15% reduction across the board of just square footage. So you'd have to go to the different schools and say which areas are least critical or what could you deal with of these cuts in the areas that you wouldn't get AC, sprinklers, new lighting, all the scope that's associated with this. So the other component to that is the bathrooms. So we said, okay, we're going to cut half of the ADA bathrooms. So if we did those two combined for model number 6, you're around $17 million ish. So that's another good chunk. But in that one, you're losing a lot of the scope. So you're losing parts of the school being updated. Number 4 is FF&E, and that was another one where we just saw that there's a big number associated with all the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. So the thought process there is, do the very critical ones, reuse all the good furniture that you can. The schools that are shutting down, consolidate all that and get the best parts. So if and then, if you do need to replace it, it's easier to replace all that furniture after construction because, if we got to come back and put AC in, we're going to mess up all the areas again. So to just take out the furniture and put it back in after construction, it's not as big of a deal as getting all the critical things in the ceiling. So basically that's taking just 25% of what the original estimate was. So a significant cut. You got about $8.5 million for Model 6. So again, another significant cut. The majority of the FF&E estimates across the models were around 9 to 11 million. So if you looked at the other spreadsheets that were provided before, you could kind of see because we had it broken down just for FF&E.
Yeah, was that a reduction of 25 or down to 25?
Down to 25.
Okay.
So
That's written. That's
It's
written.
written
So,
wrong.
yeah, so we were
Reduce to
Reduce
percentage
to.
instead of by,
Yep.
change your preposition.
So the discussion in the past meetings was 50 to 25% reduction, or 50 to 75% reduction is what I was hearing from the group. And that was also discussed that, you know, this entire group would need to be a part of that decision. So that would be the more significant cut. And then number 5 is the green report and HLS. So that added up to pretty significant numbers. So when we were originally thinking, you know, can this be covered out of the O&M budget? It probably can't, because it comes up to you know, anywhere ranging from, because this one we do have all the numbers. It ranges from 47 million up to 65 million. So it's a very significant piece of the estimates. And then the last one.
Wait, I'm sorry, on that one, but don't you have to add back whatever we weren't counting for Green Bay then? Like there wasn't any, Green Bay was in 6, right? So there wasn't any.
That's part of this whole, what I was trying to explain earlier is how a lot of these compound on each other. So like you have these as line items, but if you are going to take all of them, there's going to be discounts, because, you know, most of them do have a part that overlaps one way or the other. So, and there's also, these are also all, you know, fully loaded with all the markups and soft costs and all that. So these numbers have all that in it.
But if I was trying to keep track of like how much.
Yeah, you'd really just have to say, I want to select all these ones, and then, or which ones, and then we have to go back and
figure out what else we have to add in
how
outside.
the overlap comes into play. So, you know, after this meeting, if you guys say, these are the ones that we want to look at, we can do that and go and put the extra detail into it.
So we'll get to that point too, kind of summarize how.
I'm just understanding, so footing it doesn't do anything for me, is what you're telling me. Adding it up doesn't do anything.
Directly, I would be cautious of that.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then the last one was an idea about phasing the projects or the schools so that we can be most efficient with construction and the timeline. So this idea was to go, you know, if we're gonna renovate a school, we can do the whole thing at one time instead of doing half of it one summer and half of it the next summer. And you know, with that, we're really looking at escalation, because can we move kids from one school to one of the other schools that they're not going to be using, that it's going to be phased out as part of the referendum. So the kids from, say, Indian Trail have to go to Wayne Thomas for one semester while we renovate all of that school. So it would be a lot of moving for kids, or in resequencing of how all the busing and all that goes. But essentially the idea would be that we can get all the work done quicker. And honestly, we didn't factor this in, but contractors would it would be a more desirable project if it was a year-round project rather than just doing it in the summer. So if it was, you know, if we had a way to sequence it so it was year-round, going from one school to the next school, and the kids kind of had to move to accommodate it, it would there would be savings associated with that too. But that's not factored in there. But we essentially looked at 2% escalation savings, which would be you know, around 7 or 8 months.
We're only talking about like 3% a year we save.
Right. So I don't see that we're going to save. You know, this estimate is that we're not going to save a full year, because the entire project is, right now we're estimating it to be about a 4-year project. And then and if we're saying the sequencing, and it really comes down to the schools and everybody being able to make it work, to how this can work best. But there would be, you know, whatever schools are left out that aren't going to be part of the model, the kids will move to those schools for that semester.
Well, what's the savings? I'm not clear on what you're
2%
saying.
is what we estimated it at. So
Per year? No, total.
2% total. So total escalation that's included in our estimates is 13%. So that's based off of a 4-year project starting in 2019. So, and we use like the midpoint of the project. So yeah, but 3% a year is what we were using.
So if you did this, what would be the savings?
So 2% is what we estimated what the savings could be. If it, it could be more, it could be a little less, depending on how flexible everybody is. So that's, in model number 6, that adds up to just under $3 million. $3 million.
Dan, if we were to take all of these recommendations, what would be the ballpark, either dollar amount or percentage?
Yeah, it's a significant number if you took it all. Mostly over half of it's the green report. So it's, it could be $100 million. But that's, again, not, well, I shouldn't say that because that's not incorporating all the overlap that needs to be pulled out. So one thing that I did look at, that, looking at that number and you say, okay, this, the green report seems like it's a very high amount. And then if you look at, which ones are kind of easier gives, or what I heard from the committee and the groups as far as what might be easier gives. Number 1 for the admin, Oak Terrace, it sounded like. Number 2, Oak Terrace. Number 4, the FF&E, I heard that a bit, and again, that could be 25%, it could be 50% of the current estimate. And then also the phasing, if people thought that could work. So those were ones that you really don't lose a lot of scope at most of the schools. But that was a thought that we were looking at as well.
On number 6, on the escalation, reduced by 2%, is that a net number? Because there's a cost to moving the kids.
And this is only construction costs.
Okay.
So anything that we're estimating is only construction costs, or soft costs as well that are associated with construction on the owner side.
On number 3, A and B are combined for 17 million. What is A and what is B? Could we break those two down apart?
Yeah, the A is about 2/3.
2/3, did you say?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, this is just a specific model.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like comment in general about some of these approaches. There's X amount, if a referendum passes and we're able to do basically what we want, what the district wants, the board thinks it needs to do, there's 3 sources of funding. There's money from the referendum, there's some money, unknown amount, that from quote reserves, unquote, whatever that means, and then there's money from operating funds. So we recommend basically that we take money out of the project, the capital project we're talking about now, and pass it off on operating funds in the future. Well, that really doesn't help the board very much, because the board is going to have to resolve where the money is going to come to complete the work between now and 2025 from those 3 sources of funding. So it doesn't really help, if you will, for us to say, oh, well, we'll just pass that cost over to there, because that's really a board decision, and the board is going to have to think about how they pull together all of the pieces to come up with the funding from those 3 sources. So I'm uncomfortable about any of our, quote, cost savings, unquote, that just pass it to another revenue source. So that's just a point of concern I have in general with anything that can be described as such. 2, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of some sort of mass reduction in, oh, well, we can just reduce square foot needs by 15%. Without knowing what we're talking about, what we need for educating the kids. The mission of the district is not to please us or even necessarily to please the voters, is to give our kids the world-class education. And that needs to be the focus, and that's the kind of input that we're going to get starting Thursday and Friday at the cabinet meeting to talk about some of these options. So mass changes like that, again, I feel very uncomfortable with, because the first priority for this group has to be a world-class education for these kids.
That's a very good segue. That's where we're kind of going to lead this to. What's next is, you all had the numbers from last week. You all saw the numbers for each model. We're not necessarily going to look at them all right now, just that you got numbers for every model last week. The ask was, is this the number? Is this the number that we feel that project's worth without sacrificing the bones of that model? We aren't hitting anything that is disturbing enough that they want to change that. This was a first pass of these blue values, blue numbers, blue data, was a first pass at, are these above that line, meaning are at the line? Are these luxuries or they're not? Like the green data? I would say it's not. That's just a shift in funding. It didn't go away. You can't save it. It's just where did it get paid for. The escalation, the Green Bay is going to school, those are some fundamental questions as the models go. Are they fundamentally changing the models? Are they changing the values of what you guys have heard from the community and what you guys have collectively built up yet? So that's one of the big asks tonight is there anything within here that is a heck no that we can't live with as far as a global application across any model to help change these values? Because otherwise we go to the community with the last week's numbers, say here's our high end. We know we can hit these numbers. We can reduce these numbers, I apologize. We can reduce them by, pulling these items out, put some quantitative values next to them, say we're, number 6 is really a 150 to 170 or a 140 to 170, depending on what feedback we get from you this evening. Is there a better way to test it that way versus just saying, we'll take all these and let's recreate a new number that's dropped down a little bit? That's going to be one of the asks tonight. I'm not asking it correctly yet, but that's one of the asks that's going to be happening this evening. Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, my comment on that, just for the items in blue, the yellow one, I think it is a good suggestion to think about how we can reduce some of the admin spaces as they were on the drawings, in terms of maybe using space just for staff and having storage and auxiliary space elsewhere. But when we talk about actually keeping Green Bay instead of putting the early childhood center or the admin needs into a different building, then we're increasing the number of buildings in a number of our models. We are structurally changing the models that we've developed. So I would just hesitate on kind of saying, yep, that's what we're going to do, because it really does change the structure of a lot of our models and will impact the operating efficiency of a lot of our models as we've designed them.
I agree.
Yeah.
But it seems like, I think we had that one there because it seems silly to build a new space or a whole new wing for admin, which is what is included in some of the models. So while I totally agree with you, I think we were looking for kind of creative ways that didn't require a large investment to house administration.
And maybe it's a different use of this space, or it's a different use of another space. It's just maybe, it's a variable I think we need to look at.
Yeah.
But I would hate to just across the board say we're no longer looking at moving those to other buildings.
Well, right, and it doesn't cost nothing to keep this building open.
Right.
There's cost to stick around with this building as we keep it open.
Maybe it's just like a stopgap though. Maybe like right now we say we're not doing administration because right now we're asking a hefty chunk from the taxpayer. But we know going down the road, as we save money because we've reduced our costs, that will pile in some money for the district to then eventually shut this building down and relocate admin.
Or if if enrollment continues to decrease,
Right,
then more space might be
Right, you do get
available.
to see the evolution
Right.
of trends.
Right.
And also, the reception to how things are going. That's just another factor to think about. And then I don't know the absolute number but it should be a pretty well-known number what it costs to operate this school. and
Yeah,
keep it
no,
going.
we, I think definitely would need to know that, because that has to
And we,
factor into that.
not only do we need to, I would think very easily we would know it. We know it.
Well,
But
an
the
operating.
license operating
sorry,
is-
one second. Operating square footage for square footage, probably not that different to go to another school. I wouldn't necessarily base on that. It's probably gonna be more your labor side, your saving of a nurse or a secondary custodial or possibly a reception space that might be utilized together. So I think there was a
Plus
value.
whatever costs there are for just the building. If there's HLS costs, there's other costs that still tied to this building.
It's like 3.
Yes, there is some HLS, but not that much HLS here. There is some, but not the 14 million.
I don't think the savings would be huge by shutting this down. I mean, I think it'd be 300,000 to 400,000.
Yeah, it's only 300,000
for
for the labor
capital.
side.
In terms of the program and staff, I'm not sure there would be a huge, you probably still need most of the staff and administrators.
You get the
That's
building
well-
with the land.
That's the biggest opportunity cost really, is not selling it for $5 million
Go
or
ahead.
whatever it costs, it's valued at, so.
I think, Meg.
But that's
My
not lost.
question, John, is that Dr. Brady spoke very disparagingly about this building. Talked about the lack of the availability of things for the administration. Does that factor into this at all?
That's going to be a board and admin question.
And it's a philosophical
It's-
issue. I
It
mean,
is a question. The operating expense, I mean, it's not the most efficient from an admin perspective. We are spread out in different, I'm not even in this building, I'm somewhere else. So I mean, it is just a operational challenge. Is it worth that much? That's a value question. You guys really kind of have to answer.
I think it's a no-brainer to keep it open until all the construction is done, or if no referendum passes, perhaps even longer than that. But the building is worth $3 to $5 million, and the increase in tax revenue in the district is going to be $500,000 to $750,000 per year, forever. So that far exceeds the $250,000 a year it would take, for example, to rent space to put administration. So there is no justification at all for keeping this building open once all the construction is done, if we can forecast those kinds of tax revenue.
The $500,000 is a lot.
For
Where
one
do you get
use-
that number?
For
Well,
one
you're
use.
talking, you can build 104 condos on this property without rezoning it. And if you talk about each of those condos being worth, say, $500,000, so we're talking
I don't know, that's very
That's
optimistic.
very,
Because I would just like to say, can anyone point to the last condo built in the North Shore or proximate? There isn't.
well, there's.
Right by my house, Laurel.
Those are apartments.
What are you talking about?
Laurel, it's under construction. It's going, it's.
It's a mid-rise building or town?
They're putting in condos.
this is,
And,
Yeah,
it's
let's
just
stay on task.
started.
A little too much
It's not the
detail for
rental,
tonight.
it's next to it.
yeah, let's stay focused.
It's going in.
I
It's
have one
for
other
sale
comment.
now.
I'm not sure how we're kind of collecting feedback, and I'm sorry that I was late. But if I understood you correctly, Rick, I actually disagree with you in regards to like the green report and HLS. I do agree that it's a board decision, but I'm not sure that we should be thinking about pulling all of that cost in. And my understanding is that we need to reduce our footprint and reduce buildings to change our cost structure so that we're more efficient and effective in how we're spending our money. And I do think that that should free up millions of dollars to be able to fund, through the operating budget, some of the capital things that we'll need down the road. So that's just a contrary opinion.
Actually, I have a sort of similar contrary opinion, which is, I agree with Rick in part. I think it's obvious that the money has to come from somewhere, and it's all fungible. But to me, the idea of stripping down the referendum perhaps increases the likelihood that it passes. So you'd rather have a past referendum,
I
kick
don't-
back the green, report spending till later.
That is not at all contrary to what I'm suggesting. I
Okay.
think it's quite logical to reduce the referendum amount by assuming the money's going to come from some other source. I just don't want us to make the decision on how big a number that is. I think it's a board decision. So clearly, there needs to be money coming from all three sources that I mentioned. But we shouldn't here decide exactly how much that is.
No, but we're also
Recommendation
trying
to the
to keep this to the
recommendation.
community at large, and so I think what we need to get our heads around tonight is an understanding of,
Kind of the project number,
Yeah.
not the funding mechanism, but the funding.
Right.
What's the project number for
It's a
this?
very difficult thing to explain, but probably should be part of any opening remarks next week is the numbers you're gonna see are total project, construction numbers over a certain period of time. Not necessarily a referendum number.
Correct.
The district will be in a position to.
I don't understand though why you have to roll all the future green spending into a project number if it just inflates the gross project size, and that'll turn people off, because it's actually, it really is future obligations, that you're.
and the whole point is to become more
discretionary to-
operationally efficient so that you can cover those future expenses.
So I guess the value is in comparing it to the 12 building model. That shows it's a decrease, like we're no longer investing in the green report in 12 buildings, it's in 8 or 9 or whatever it is.
Well, part of it is also you've got all these walls open and ceilings open, so you want to do a lot of this work at once because it's more efficient.
I'm not saying you'd actually want to defer the work, but I don't know why you have to inflate the project amount to be as large as possible on a gross basis.
I agree with that.
I think the bigger
Bigger
question
capital.
is, I think what you said is, we're gonna show numbers of this, but really, people are gonna see that as the referendum size, and that may not be the referendum size.
You should not be portraying this as a referendum
I'm not,
in any way.
what we're portraying, what they read are two different things. We just have to be careful about how we're communicating it.
Well, I
it's
think
more
we have to
important
be
that we
careful how we
communicate
present it.
actively that it is not a referendum bond amount, because I think people will default to that. They'll say, well, the old number was 198, this is.
Right, I think you probably need to do above the line and below the line when you present these numbers so people can see.
But we won't know below the line. We won't know what your referendum amount is, right? Like, that's something you guys decide later on once you figure out all the moving parts on the finance side. I think we just have to very clearly say, this is the long-term cost of this project, whatever it is, whether it's 4 years or 10 years out. And it has nothing to do with the referendum amount. The referendum amount is only going to cover parts of this. And that's going to be determined later after all of the finances are put into place to see how this plays out in the long term.
So let me just ask something that's kind of a goofy question, but if that's the fact, I mean, so for the average Highland Parkian, do they care about that number? Any of these?
The bottom number, they care about.
They care
No, I
about
don't
the
think so. I think about the referendum.
They care about the
But see,
Right,
I
but
think
they
the
think
question-
that's the referendum number.
That's my point.
Right,
Yeah.
but see, I think the question you're gonna get is, well, so what is it, 25%? Or, is 25% gonna come from other sources and 75% referendum? That's gonna be the first question.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I just wonder, we're creating a mountain for ourselves, right? When you lay this number out,
I agree.
no matter what, however you want to phrase it, they're gonna read, that says referendum across the line.
So I think what you want to portray is a project cost, which.
But why do they care about the project cost?
So I'm saying project cost is the stuff that we're doing that's sort of outside of, that is. Yeah, outside of the cost of operation. So you've got a project cost, so it includes whatever renovations we're doing. You've got, is it 5 years of maintenance? Okay. Okay, whatever the years, 10 years of maintenance, X dollars, and, if you want to total that, you total it. But I think the idea is to separate those numbers. Now, how those get funded and what happens with the referendum and all the rest is still open to determination, but at least there's more of an apples to apples there, and you're separating out what is really, otherwise would be costs we would do over time, over some period of time, whether it's 5 or 10 years. I think that number should be pulled out of this.
So that's kind of what Megan was saying, which I think kind of got glossed over a little bit, which is by showing the green report numbers, it's not the total cost of the green report going forward.
Yeah.
It's what the green report numbers would have been with 12 schools. So that number should be portrayed as this model will save this portion. That's a big component of these total costs. That should be shown as, instead of it being $70 million, because of making that number up, instead of being $70 million, it's now $35 million. It's not part of the total cost. Some of this will occur, but we would have to spend that 70 regardless.
Well,
So it's the savings.
or maybe it's this building, this is an 8-building option, and so with this 8-building option, the next 5, 10 years, whatever it is X million, rather than what's not being spent on green is what would be spent on green, is that total?
Either way, it should be shown as what is
Yeah.
going to be spent just on these these buildings and just be eventually compared to what would be spent on another option which has a different set of buildings.
Can I suggest we're getting ahead of our conversation a little bit, Jeff, just before we continue down this path? We're kind of combining 3 items into one. One of them is, here is a list among the many options of things that could be represented, thinking in the short term now about what we're going to show the public next week, as items that would be in that sort of scalable list, if you like.
I'd like to comment on what you're saying.
Number 2 is part of the conversation we're having now, which is how do we want to represent numbers, period? Which is, you know, is it project cost? Is it above the line and below the line? Is it a range? Is it a spot number? What kind of characterization do we put around that? And then, you know, kind of beyond that, it's really diving deeper into these things and actually crafting real recommendations and looking at the financing and the sort of the broader perspective. So I think what we wanted to start with was for Dan to kind of walk through, these are some numbers around this list. And we don't want to skip over it before we say, on the blue things, right, is there anything here that someone has real antibodies to and wants to just take off the list completely? We would not want to pursue that as a kind of in our decision set to begin with.
I'd like
So
to,
I have a
I'd like to
issue.
ask a question.
I
How
was gonna
many
say-
options are we going to come up with tonight? 3 to show at the forum.
That's another topic.
Not
How
yet
many?
happened. We're gonna get there.
3?
No.
No.
More than
Oh, okay, let me ask. Right now, all the options on the sheet are between 160 and 200, low 200s. I think it's going to be crazy to not to have at least one model that is significantly less than the failed referendum, where people are going to be scratching their heads and saying, you're showing us 8, 10 models that are much closer to the one that failed than what a good portion of the community may want to stay below. So I guess what I'm saying is a lot of the discussion tonight is going to be which option, which really bears a lot on which schools to close and which, what the educational benefits are of having K2 and 3-5 or whatever. But I think we should at least have 1 or 2 models that show the public how you get down to about 125,000 million. Now,
Hold that thought.
okay.
We're going to have that conversation, and it's an important one to make sure we're all aligned in terms of what we want to put forward in terms of the number of models, and we've got some proposals to certain things around. But in terms of all of these things, I think it's safe to say the numbers that we see here is all the things we think should be done, if they were all done essentially immediately. This is the not to exceed number. That's what we've started at the top and we're kind of working our way down. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it's not necessarily an alternative model, but an alternative execution of some of these models that might actually get.
But it has to do
the
with
wide
how
range
the
we're
group
talking
feels,
about.
what the compromises are that have to be made to get down to a certain.
And we don't need to make that decision tonight, thank goodness. But what we do need to do is decide how we're going to represent these numbers such that we don't have all the unintended consequences that have been raised. It is not the ambition to get to the final solution of all the recommendations and cuts and everything by next week. But what we do need to say is there anything that we wouldn't want to put on the table as a considered sort of cut or efficiency, if you like?
Remember, next week is a big test week. It's another touch point with the community to test a lot of these concepts, ideas, or theories, or Harvard. That's one of the questions later is what are some of the test questions that you may have out of all this. So this isn't decision making tonight. It's not decision making by next Tuesday. It's more data collection. So when you guys get the next 3 or 4 weeks together, when you guys start really making decisions about narrowing this down to the final 2, 3, whatever models get presented to the board, that's going to be the hard decision. That's when the hard part is.
So I think we all agree we need to show numbers, but we want to make sure we're doing a responsible job showing those numbers so we don't set off a lot of folks making the wrong assumption about what we're trying to convey. So Rocky, you've been waiting patiently.
So you asked about
some of the things that we think we shouldn't show, right, as an option, or?
If there are things you think you should.
Well, I'll just say, I have an issue with 3A. Arbitrarily eliminating anything concerns me, because this was a very deliberate process, and to arbitrarily do anything, like, negates all the work.
Well, arbitrarily is the wrong word.
It's the wrong word.
It's just the wrong word.
Selectively.
Summarily.
Selectively.
Well, to take a 15% cut across the board of all the spaces, it's like, you know.
15 is
I hear where you're coming from.
It's just
That is
that-
arbitrary, the
This
decisions
wording
are
or
not.
this concerns me.
I understand what you're saying. I think it's a semantic thing. The idea is to say, we don't renovate every room in every building to the same standard. There's things that we leave in a more raw condition or an as-is condition in a very judged-up way to do that.
Selectively.
But we commit to reducing the investment by 15%.
Oh, that's done all the time on
I still
projects.
think that's still like, I feel like there should be some criteria. Like, I appreciate the admin, like maybe we don't do the admin, and maybe that's how we get to the 15%, but just to say it must be 15% or.
I think this was successfully implemented in the high school project, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken, where there were certain things that were just done over time. It
Yeah.
goes along with the furniture.
I guess
These are
I
not
get the
structural
intent,
things.
I'm just, let's be careful.
Your child's classroom will not be painted, but another child's classroom will.
Or like, there was one example on the phone call where if you just choose to do like the ductwork in the hallways and then lead them into the classrooms, then you don't have to do the ceilings and everything in each of the classrooms. So that might.
Different approaches.
If you just chose to do a different approach on one mechanical feature of the building, that might give you the 15% or whatever reduction that you're looking for, or you might have to combine that, but.
Yeah, but that wouldn't have been the option chosen
But then
in the
that's
drawing if that didn't, if supplying air conditioning in that manner was equivalent to, you know, bringing it to the windows or something like that. So otherwise, why would that method not have been the method chosen?
Rocky, has your opinion shifted as you've heard more qualifications, or do you still feel that interior renovation staging is
I
not
think
an
that there
appropriate thing to
should,
do?
we should always be looking at ways to optimize our costs, whether that's 15% or 20%, we don't know. But we should, you know, evaluate the way we ultimately do the construction, whether it's.
How about non-arbitrarily?
Just look for ways to reduce costs wherever possible.
You can creative cost
Yeah.
reduction, 15% cost reduction across the board and not make it arbitrary, so you're actually
That's still
surgically.
arbitrary. Well,
You could be.
you get my point.
Yeah.
I've stated my case. Let's move on.
But that's But I think that was a recommendation that took into account some of the examples that Julie referenced, where, yes, you could take 15% out without causing significant additional cost by having to go in and like tear things out and do them later.
Right.
You could actually do that without undermining the bones of the model, if you like.
And that may be 15 or 20% at this building and 5% at this building, just because of the way the makeup of the building.
Right.
There may be some flex in that.
Can I ask, what's the, this is a stupid question, I apologize. What's the value of giving them the cost of any of these? Because we don't know what the referendum's going to be. Right. We don't actually know what the cost is because we're going to adjust things. So I would just posit that most people would say, I like the lowest cost one. But really, is that the input we really, if we're trying to get input on what kind of value they're willing to accept in a referendum, I think that's a different question than tying the numbers to each of these things.
And that's exactly what I just said to Ronnie, which is we can put 127 million or 147, it doesn't mean anything. It means something when it's compared to something that is 100 or 200.
I think the question is, what's the answer we're trying to get from this group? What's the value we're trying to get from showing this? If it's tied to the dollars, but I don't know if it is. I think it's tied to what they feel about the configurations and where things are flowing more than the cost, because we're going to get the cost figured one way or the other anyway.
But you
I
have a
guess my
group
concern
that
would
Jeff
be-
represents that it's tied to the dollar.
No, but that's a different question. The question for not Jeff, but the question for any group is, you know, there's certain amounts of referendum that's going to cost this much in real estate taxes. We can tell you what it is. Give us a value of what you're willing to accept.
Let me pose it to you a different way.
Okay.
If you said, the number, here's a configuration, do you like it? And here's a number that is probably wrong and could change a lot, and we're going to put a big range around it, versus no number. How do you think the response might be different? I personally feel like I'm convinced that no number suggests a lot of things that people are going to invent their own explanation for why there's no number being shared at this point. If we're supposed to be on our timeline, delivering final recommendations to the board in near term, I just think the idea would be, given all the drop around numbers in the last round, I just wonder what explanation people would come up with for why there was no number and what number they would assume was correct.
But to your point, Ralph, we have ranges of high, medium, and low. We know that some of these models are extremely expensive, some are less expensive, and some are moderately expensive. We're never gonna fine tune this enough by next week to have numbers that has any meaning other than people grabbing onto them and running with them for the next 6 weeks.
Maybe it's premature, is what he's
It's
saying.
so
I just think
premature.
whatever number we
If that's the
We've-
case, can't we use an icon, like dollar signs or something?
Exactly.
Like in the Zagat guide, or say
Exactly.
$3 signs in this one, $2 signs.
With a key that says.
Like, no, I'm serious.
No, I am too.
She said that last week.
Yeah, that was your help.
It doesn't matter, people are gonna look at, as Jeff said,
That's the price tag.
is there what's under 100 million that's no one gonna care about?
What's wrong with having that number that's admittedly a gross approximation, that then we're showing that we're working on a process, that as the process continues over the next month, that number is going to be
Because that number is gonna decline based on arbitrary cuts of 15%.
Well, no, I mean, that arbitrary cuts of 15%, frankly, the way it should be.
Premature.
It's early, but it's showing that we're working on a
But some people
process.
may just arguably say, I don't like that model because it's way too expensive. We really don't know.
Right.
But that very well could change, and if somebody gets way over their skis early on by saying, this is lousy, you've shown that you're not doing anything, when we then come back in a month with more refined numbers.
But the problem that we're always gonna face at every stage is people are gonna say, well, how much is it gonna cost? You like this or you like that? Well, how much is it gonna cost? Every stage you bring these things up, you get those kinds of
But
questions.
see, also having numbers gives a way to evaluate some of these cuts. Like instead of saying arbitrarily eliminate, say, let's assume that we
I
change
think
the
in
class
this group,
size.
for us to discuss the costs and I think that's valuable information.
But even for the public, it gives them something, if we can say, look, if we reduce the class size assumption by 10%, every class is going to be 10% smaller, that's going to save X number of dollars. But here, this is what that means as an impact. Is it worth it to save that, whatever, $8 million? Like with the escalation one. Say, here, look, you know what, we do year-round construction.
I think what we wanted to do, Dan, is understand what, like, we have the survey results, right? Like, they value HVAC and ADA, et cetera, but we wanted to get feedback knowing, okay, that's gonna cost X million.
We're getting
Do you
close.
still really value it? And
That
I
was
don't wanna get ahead.
why we agreed to do it initially, why we first got into this concept of showing some numbers at this time, and maybe it should be revisited, given that we're still trying to cut. I'm not saying we should, maybe it's the wrong time. But the reason we did it was not to give a final number on the reconfiguration. It was a form of education that people could say, what are they talking about, 125 million? And that you could show, in general, bringing air conditioning to the district, and maybe that's what we need to do, not put numbers on. It may be that later stage you're talking about. If we get to the point this evening that we decide these are the 6 we want to bring to the forum, maybe we could come up with, on these 6 plans, it costs relatively X amount of dollars to bring air conditioning, X amount of dollars to bring 75% ADA, whatever values we decide if we get to those values. The idea was not to show them the cost of the configurations
So you
now.
could do
The
a
idea was
build
to
up.
educate them, why does this cost so much money?
So you could do a build-up across the board of saying HVAC incrementally increases.
Well, now that Julie's
by
putting
X
it from the
percent. You could do
hall,
it by
I have no
percentages.
idea what it costs. But yes, that excluded.
I
And
get
then-
what you're saying. You're
Yes.
saying, don't put the bottom
It wasn't,
line.
that was why we chose it. I'm trying to remember, at least I thought that was why we thought it had value at this point. Because people cannot wrap their heads around these dollars. Are you kidding? My house cost, not mine, but someone will say, my house cost, let me say mine. This house costs $78 million. They want $78,000. And I put in air conditioning for, $4,000. My other question is, when you went through this the cost-cutting people or the consultants to the professional team, and I see you're doing some percentages on some improvements, did we consider, and please don't say this won't save money because you're trying to save $1.2 million and $1.3 million, why are we considering supplying fire suppression down the corridors, into the gyms, into any place where there's a lot of people collected, a lot of bodies, like passing in halls, or in a gym, or in the lunchroom, or in the auditorium, and et cetera. And why do we have to fully sprinkle the classrooms? The classrooms, 90%, if not 100%, have a way to get out a window, and if not, they're at a door immediately where there is fire suppression, that they can open a door.
We did talk about that. So that committee did address.
That's
When
on,
it's here,
it's on
not in the top.
reduction
So the way that this was
consideration.
Where is
organized
it?
is that
Eliminate new sprinklers in existing areas.
But the way that this was
no,
organized,
on
Helen,
the blue.
The
here.
blue
it's
is
not on there
the
because it was
Wait, let me hear your
outside
answer.
opinion
Uh-huh.
of Gilbane in terms of reviewing the scope of the project and what was submitted by the cost reduction team. It's like when you go to the doctor and say, what would you do if it was your kid? This is
And-
what they would do if it was their kid.
Why? Why do you want a sprinkler every classroom when every class or
Helen, we gotta stop this, we gotta stop this conversation.
Well, if
because
this is going, we're trying to get a number down, I'd like to know
We're not trying to
why
get a
that
number
isn't.
down.
Huh?
So we're having an existential debate right now. We have two options. One is to say, we're not gonna show you any numbers, because numbers are premature and they would only harm you, if you know them now. You know where my bias is going.
Or we'll show you bad ones.
Yes. We'll show you one that will be very clear that they are ranges, because there's a ton, and this discussion has been a wonderful illustration of how many decisions are internal to what the final number is. You're right, Darren, they're not real numbers, but they do represent real ranges. So I think if we could align on the fact that they might actually be boundaries, that would be something to communicate.
They're relative to each other.
Better than
Well,
nothing.
that's the key point.
They're relative across the board,
Yeah.
that's what's key. They give you a relative scale.
You know what's surprising to me is that we've been doing this for over a year, and I don't have a feeling that anybody here has an idea as to what's going to be an acceptable number to the community. We've taken surveys, we've taken focus groups, we've taken discussions, and now you're going to have a forum. It seems to me like the biggest thing that you're going to want to get out of the forum is, what do they think about the cost? So you have to ask the question. Otherwise, we're going to come out of this saying, yeah, I like air conditioning,
So Jeff,
or I like
the way we've had
sprinkling.
this conversation, and I'm glad you brought that up because it comes up a lot. The way we've had this conversation is, we've asked Raw, basically, what number do you support? We got that feedback. Everything else has to be asked in context of something. Do you value this? Do you value that? Do you value this enough? And that's an iterative process.
You know,
So we're not gonna go back and ask
I
for
was
that
in
number
this
again.
business, and there's $100 million projects that are put together on what they call a scope basis.
I'm sorry, Jeff, we're not gonna have the conversation of how to get to the right number at this time. We have to make a bunch of decisions tonight to be ready for next week.
Yeah, I think though that we just have to keep emphasizing that this number is not the referendum number. Okay, and that has to.
I agree.
That has to, we have to keep saying that over and over and over again.
Lori, and I think that what you're touching on is so important, which is that there's a broader question of how do we frame the conversation? You know, so the question of to show numbers or to not show numbers, I would say the people who will say no matter what, will want to see the numbers, and they'll be indignant if they can't see the numbers.
Well, that's the thing,
And
we've
the
already
people
made a commitment to show.
And
who
it's
can't
frustrating.
say, and the people who can't say until they see something will also need to see numbers before they can say, maybe, no way. Like, it's
Which
really,
comes back to, I'll pay for this, but I wouldn't pay for that. And that gets back to your number question, which is very important, Jeff.
What are those numbers?
I think that we
Maybe
said in here pretty much that we're gonna show numbers.
Yeah, we've already said that. I'm not sure why we're talking about not showing them,
Yeah.
because we've
And I
already
think
made
we're
a commitment.
scared.
Public vote.
It's a
We've made a commitment.
It's a definite gonna show what a
compromise.
number
Yes.
is. Are you saying you're gonna show 171 million, or you're gonna say this is gonna be between 150 and 175?
Yes.
That's a number. Because we're looking at, I mean, we're talking about cutting, and this might be from last week, but something down from 171 to 110. What number are you gonna show? 110 or 170?
And of that number, how much of it is actually a referendum?
Right, well, forget about, I agree.
You need it both.
But maybe, okay, the two things we're trying to get out of this, right, are comparative kind of value from one model to the other, right?
Yeah.
And then the second thing we're trying to get out of is showing people how much each feature kind of costs, so that they get, we get them over the sticker shock. So maybe that's all we put on there. Instead of putting this is a $171 million model, we put dollar signs that show the relative, aspect from this model to the next. And then we also show the range for HVAC. Anywhere in these models could be anywhere from $19 million to $26 million.
I think we're converging towards something. Melissa, do you think it'd be helpful to show the boards that you mocked up?
Yeah.
Because I think the build-up model, it's actually a lot of what you're saying is in there.
Yeah, it does have the numbers from the Gilbane information, so that's what I pulled for it, but we can word the numbers differently. I just think because we already made a commitment to show numbers at these forums, that we won't look very good if we all of a sudden don't show
We have to keep our
anything.
commitments.
I agree,
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
And I
that's
also
true.
feel like people are forgetting that there were people who voted yes for things that cost way more than this. I mean, these numbers are less than the last referendum. Like, that's, Jeff, where I was kind of confused by your statement. You're saying, most of them are looking at them less.
But the
By how much?
But
It
people,
wasn't the dollar amount.
It wasn't the dollar amount, it looks different across the board.
Right, people voted no for different reasons, and dollar amount sometimes had nothing to do with
And
it.
did 80% of the people in the survey say they would go for between $100 million referendum? And we have that data, right?
Yeah, I think it was 75 to 100.
Yeah.
The people that I spoke with that voted no, voted because they did not like the
plan, exactly.
Not because of the number. I heard over and over and over again, show me some different plans. So I think that's where we need to focus, is showing the plans.
We have a survey
to
that
be
said-
careful not to talk about anecdotal data, because we have a survey that very clearly shows the number one reason why people voted no was because of the number.
Was a number. That was the number one thing in the survey.
Well, I'm very disappointed we don't have any estimates. Seems like there's a swag.
A for effort, A for effort.
Well, let's get you set up. Some of us doesn't hear silence. I'll let the two jump. Can we address 16?
Hey, John, people are freezing, John.
Can we remove air conditioning from this building?
How much would it cost to get an off switch?
I know, one next time I bring you wool socks. It's just an off switch.
I just want to update everybody.
Thermostat.
On number 16, we are hoping to have the numbers by Friday, actually, end of the day, so we will have them for the referendum, or for the
Forums?
the forum. We just want, we don't have the numbers published tonight, so they will become available.
Do we have a ballpark right now?
I'm sorry?
Do we have like a rough ballpark?
What Don tells me it's going to be the most expensive.
Well, we could have told you that.
I don't think that's
It would take you 3 weeks to do that.
We don't have rough numbers.
16. So it's more than 220 million.
Yes. Yeah, it would, it would probably north of 250.
You said to us already,
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, guys, so this is an idea for how we might show the concepts. Model A is the same as 6 that we've been talking about so much. So we have a map that shows where the buildings are in this concept. And then we have the feeder patterns for how the sections work and whether or not they're dual or mono, and then how they feed into the middle schools and how many sections we have there. So each one of the little people is a section in a grade level. And then we would have the bullets. Link recommended that we do have everything on the same board. The forum planning committee had kind of talked about it.
Bless you.
I sent a couple ideas out to that group and to Link, and they recommended that we keep it on the same board. And for those of you who were involved with that, they don't think we can print 60 by 36. So the 48 by 36 is what they think we can print, which is bigger than the boards last time, but not as big as the one that people had kind of responded to. So the idea is to keep everything on the same board so that as people look at the bullets, they can reference the map, they can reference the feeder pattern, and they can kind of work through it that way. So we were thinking that the boards would be consistent across the concepts. So you would have sections, dual language, middle school, early childhood, you would have the same sort of categories on all of the models so that you could then sort of fill in for how each model addresses those things. And then lower down is where you might have sort of your individual characteristics. And those would be a little bit more flexible depending on what the model is.
Can I just ask?
Is this slightly different than what I saw earlier? Was that a 4th version?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was, I got
It's awesome.
feedback. Well, I got some feedback from different people in our group, and then I also, we had our call with Link and got their feedback, so then I put together the revisions, and this is how it looks after the revisions. And they may make it look different still. This is not, I'm going to send them the different elements, and they're going to put together what they think will work. But just the idea that all these things will be on the same board.
Back to you, Mark. We have an 8 o'clock meeting following up with them at tonight's city to roll with any information from tonight.
Right.
Will there be a, or what's your thoughts on like a key or some sort of definition? I know we've talked about it before, but stuff like we have 3 sections, 2 academies, 2 teams. So just so people understand the differences between those.
So people will also have their piece that they're walking around with that will have all the models, and then on the back there's a glossary so that they can look at some of those definitions, but we've also put them in parentheses so that they don't have to look very far. And then the keys to the individual graphics are up there, and the abbreviations for the schools are up there. And those, you may not be able to see all that, but the key delineates whether it's dual or mono or.
Melissa, I know these aren't final, but one thing just, and I know there's keys in there, but someone very quickly looking at it, I think would have a hard time looking at the schools in blue and then on the right, the early childhood center in blue and not thinking they're the same.
Yeah, the problem is so I did switch them, and I could just make the early childhood a totally different color.
That's all I'm saying, is when I look left, I'm like, oh, I see blue and blue.
Right. Yeah. Because I had switched the elementary schools to the dark blue, but then I realized that then it looks like they're all monolingual because they don't differentiate. So I'll just make the early childhood people a different color. But conceptually, does this work for everybody in terms of showing like the overview of the concept? This would be one board, and then the next board, and this is just what we had talked about before this whole conversation tonight. So this board would be the idea of what the components are that went into the number. That's what we had talked about before was, okay, here's the project cost.
Renovation, green report,
Yeah, so it's
Those should all be
renovation.
grossed up by the same contingencies, so then when people look across, the math adds up.
Well, so there's not room to put you know,
The
everything.
3 on the left do not include any contingencies or
Right.
soft costs, the ones on the right do. So 3.5 plus 1.8 plus 3.9 does not equal 17 point.
But there's a footnote that says all of that, because
Yeah.
otherwise.
But it doesn't
Doesn't matter.
I looked at this and I do this all the time, and it took me a while to figure this out. So these numbers in the columns to Adam's point, all need to add up to the last column, or else you're just gonna lose everyone and no one's gonna understand.
Yeah.
I mean, look at
agree.
Oterra, it's 2.8 billion, 3.1, and all of a sudden you're at 11.
So this is a second board on its own. That configuration would have this widespread data like this. And this is where, when you did a draft of estimated project cost, that won't exist here anymore. It'll be like burrow through that.
So the idea is that there would be 3 boards per concept. You would have the board that describes what the concept is and how it works, the math, the feeder pattern, the bullets. And then you would have a second board that describes whatever we determine we want to use as the cost components and how we got there. And then a third board would be the feedback board for that concept.
But if I'm looking at this, does this much detail help me in my decision process about what I think about Model A?
Yes.
I don't know. I
It
mean,
does?
this is what we talked about before, but we don't have
Yeah.
to do it this way. I mean,
People
we
talk about wanting the individual components of the renovation, they talk about wanting to have that. If we don't find that's a value, that's
Right.
having a discussion.
Here's what's here.
But I need to know tonight.
What
Here's
if,
what's here.
I have a question for you, Melissa.
Yeah.
What if we had either the columns down or the categories across, every other one a different color, or, you know, using like white, yellow, or white, pale something? Just because when people are going across to read, it'll be easy to follow a line. Either one way or the other, don't make it plaid, but, you know, like,
Well, what we're going to do.
one thing across is
Let me make
one
one thing
color.
What we're going to do
So-
is, we're just gonna
Yeah.
give this data the link,
Yeah.
and they're going to set it up on the board.
Fabulous. Thank
But
you
we
very
need
much.
to know what data to give them, so that they have
Thank
something to
you,
say.
I appreciate that.
Melissa, did we make a decision about giving people stuff to carry around?
Yeah, we're not giving anything that would be taken home. There are no take-homes. Well, what we're giving people is a one-pager with a basic rundown of the models, and then, like the opportunity to indicate their favorites or whatever, some kind of scoring opportunity, and then on the back is the glossary. So it helps them navigate the room, just in terms of, oh, here's model A, oh, that's over there, you know, that kind of thing, and then they leave it at the door, and we have a pile of those with kind of how they scored them.
If our goal is to get feedback from a model and a cost perspective, to give people a granularity of what renovations at Ravinia and Red Oak under this model cost, all they're gonna focus in on is their school and how their school is not getting the fair share, or in their mind, the fair share of renovation costs, for example, as opposed to what the holistic model does. So, you know, in my opinion, it's great to have the data as, for public knowledge, but for a quick walk-around 2-hour forum meeting, we should show total renovation costs and total, whatever the other categories are, just remember, total green report costs and total addition costs, and that's really what you're deciding on the model, not where those dollars are going in the specific schools, for the purpose of determining if the model makes sense. Because all you're gonna get is, well, what's my school getting? And no
Oh,
one's
I
gonna
see
pay
your
attention.
point.
The
The
flip
plan
side,
gets
though,
a
is-
cost,
The plan.
but not per school.
You know, it's
the
great
plan.
to know the renovation existing and the green report additions as a total, not as subtotals.
Well, I think in addition to that, we're gonna get so lost in the
down.
details
Yeah.
on this that I don't think it's gonna be a really productive 2 hours. I think it
Right.
can be
Someone's
so
gonna say
easy
$12
to
million
get.
for new furniture? What the hell are you guys
Right,
thinking
and
about?
then you've got to.
They don't know what FFE is.
Well, it's not even, it's that.
So that's another 20 minutes.
What's that?
It's not the website.
Why is Sherwood getting a $3 million? Why is
Falls out.
Right.
I think,
But the flip side that's been presented before, and maybe this is what Rick was about to say, but some people want to know how much it costs to renovate versus building new, or they want to have like that
That's there,
We get to
information.
that's
that
there,
point,
but that's there.
Yeah, that would be.
And the bottom line
That's
is
there
there.
in a total. The purpose of the forums is to get feedback on the models, not on granularity.
You might be right.
So we don't want to show per building amounts. Is that?
and I think we need to make a point that number, that $171 million, however you show it, is the maximum, okay? Or it's very close to the maximum. It is not necessarily what the final number is going to be, and I think we need to put that on the board.
Right, and
Go
we've
back to
got
the-
space for, I even put bullet specific to this model or something about cost recovery.
I can't read it either.
Yeah, it's, but there's opportunities in the bullets to kind of,
Yeah,
talk to some of the numbers. All right.
I'd be willing to wager that a good 80% of people coming will agree with an HLS meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
As well as FF&E.
So how
You need to combine the first two columns into one number, and you should put the escalation in that number.
Say it again.
You should combine the first two columns into one number, and then add escalation to that number. Not escalation, the contingencies and the other stuff.
Well, no, the green report is a long-term capital expenditure.
No, you leave it, you put it in, is my point, because you want, I agree with you.
Add it in.
Add it
Sure,
in,
right.
add it in. See, the last column does have to be the total of the others.
Absolutely.
So the first
Yeah.
column needs to be reconfiguration, renovation, green report together with contingencies added to it. Well, but people don't know what the green report
We'll
is.
call it long-term capital maintenance. It's called long-term capital, we're operating.
Yeah.
Stuff we checked on. We'll come up with what has to be.
Like the stuff we didn't do. over
The stuff we didn't do over the last
Yeah.
20 years, don't understand that.
It's only some of the stuff we need to do.
You know,
I just have one question before, I know we're gonna get to this point where we decide what ones are gonna be presented, but before we leave this room, because, you know, we're gonna be the ones that are having to explain, or, you know, be at the stations, if we could just figure out, for instance, Model 6 equals Model A, that would be so helpful, because when I saw like the one today, I was still trying, when you emailed it out, I was trying to figure out which of the 1 through, you know, 24 is this?
So
Just
I'm,
like
I'm
kinda
so
going
glad
through.
you said that, because before we leave tonight,
Okay.
before we leave tonight, we are going to determine which configurations we're presenting, how we're grouping those concepts, and how we're staffing our stations based on the responses we've gotten from everyone, because we want to have a really multidisciplinary team at each station who can speak to education, finance, facilities.
you know, if you're gonna add columns so that all the columns add up on the right, which I think is correct, very important to me, why not just say costs in millions of dollars and have the first one be 1.6 and so forth, instead of going to the $4 at the end?
Yeah, well, the concern was that these guys have worked very hard on these numbers and.
But this
do we
implies
want
very
to-
accurate. So I think if everything's a rounded number, that also implies that it's still an estimate.
Yes.
Let me ask the group a question about, so we've been having this discussion about, so I feel like there's a lot of comfort around this sort of thing, sort of showing kind of where's the money going. So we're coming back to, we began with the end, which was the discussion we had a couple of meetings ago about how did the high school group for 113 successfully persuade the community to understand, you know, what were they spending their money on and feel comfortable to vote for them, right?
Exhaustion.
Perhaps. But part of it was by showing this and that. So we've got more buildings than they were dealing with one. But I think we keep coming back to things. We keep coming back to the idea that people don't have any idea where the money's going or how it could possibly be so expensive.
Right.
And I want to make an argument in favor, to play devil's advocate of kind of the way the discussion's gone, for people that weren't on the committee that worked very hard to get to this. Because remember, we delegated to a subcommittee of our members. We came up with this, right? Version, or at least had a lot of input into it. So then, in this case, what you see is illuminating to actually see that there's millions of dollars that need to go into every single one of these buildings and bring them up to the standard that 2.0 is sort of saying meets the goals of the district and meets the priorities that we identified from the different sources that we consulted. And you're actually seeing that all of these buildings cost a significant amount of money, and there's an internal, you know, just all of the renovation costs. I think there's actually kind of a powerful educational effect to seeing those numbers repeated over and over in all these different configurations. What you don't escape is numbers like that. And I don't think people have seen anything like that before about this, other than rolled up into these enormous numbers in the previous the 200 million bill. So I actually think the message of all that crap, whether people read it or not, is holy cow, there's a lot of money just to get to the baseline. And
Why
I
not
think
have
there's, so I think there's a value in that message.
Why not have a forum just on that subject? Specifically on why it costs so much? Nothing else, only that subject.
Because we don't have more
Have
forums.
time.
Ralph, I completely agree with you. I think it's interesting because if people may say, why would you spend so much money on this particular 100-year-old building? And maybe then they start scratching their heads saying, wow, one day maybe we ought to replace 2 small buildings and use the same funds to build a new building. It's very educational to see what it is just to bring them up to a modern standard.
Well,
I like the
you just made the
detail.
argument that we shouldn't be spending money on it now, then.
What?
That we shouldn't spend on it now, is the argument you just made.
And
If you're showing how expensive two buildings
I
are.
think it's educational for people. It really is.
And when you
But
have
IRS presented as an option, though, it's not saying, here, FYI, data point, here's what it would cost to bring them all up.
Someone's gonna say,
It's
why does-
presented as an actual.
You're right. Why does every model have $15 or $20 million going into every particular building?
Yeah.
And you're right, that is something it's our job to
Because
educate.
they all need it.
They all
And that's
need
the
it.
message, they
You
all
can't-
need it.
You can't escape that.
Yeah, so that's why I think, yes, we need to simplify it down to 3.6. Sorry, guys, we're gonna lose the $4 at the end. And we can gross it up so that the actuaries in the room are not offended by the lack of horizontal. But I don't know if we have this map, so we talked a lot about seeing the value of the comparative cost of these things and saying, gosh, a lot of these models are actually within a pretty tight range, 160 to 200 or whatever it is. A lot of these buildings, I mean, they're expensive, but it's not always intuitive to figure out which one would be more expensive to keep or to lose, right? So what you learn from this is, wow, it costs a lot of money to do any kind of referendum or any kind of reconfiguration that actually meets the goals of the district. And there's a huge amount of play in stuff like this. It's not about the buildings. You can actually do a lot of different things with the buildings, but you can do that.
You're again not getting to why is this model something that you would vote for? Because what you're getting at is, I'm gonna vote for it because they're spending the most amount of money for the school that my kids go to.
We're not really looking for, as the only goal.
It's gotta be cost benefit. I've been saying this for a long, long time. It's all cost benefit. So
But that's
guys
on the
should-
board before, so you have.
No, I understand. I agree with everything you're saying, that it's good to have this data. I think in a 2-hour-long forum, that people's eyes are gonna fall out looking at this.
And there are some people who will look at it and they'll go, "Ooh."
I'm not-
And then they'll move to the next board, and there are some people who really can, like, this is how I assimilate this information.
Other than the 171,995,701 on this board, that's the only thing I'm gonna look at when I'm comparing to what this model is to everything else. I'm not gonna look at.
Aren't you a little concerned that the day after this, the message that's gonna be in the papers or any place is that the minimum referendum size is gonna be $160 million?
No.
You're not concerned with that?
Well, I think that's a concern no matter how we show numbers in any form. If we show any number can be taken out of
Well,
context.
we've got some other ideas on how to show the relative differences between them without showing black
I think
numbers.
showing dollar signs or like Yelp review stars is probably not gonna do any more than showing a dollar. So a dollar amount, as soon as we show a dollar amount, as long as it's not a single dollar amount, it could be, people can choose what numbers they want to emphasize, right? So I understand what you're saying, but I think we're kind of boxed in at this point in our development, given what we've been communicating, we're not gonna get out of showing numbers. And we shouldn't be afraid to do that. But I think we need to communicate a range around each of the numbers. So yes, it could go up to 200, it could go up to 171. Is it likely that that's what we would put forward as the project that ultimately gets done? Not very much, no.
Let me ask you a question. Do we have any idea of, pick any number you want, any one of these. Do we have any idea of once we've locked in a number, how much of that would actually go through a referendum? In other words, there's some amount of surplus, there's all these different variables in
No,
there.
and we're not going to be the people to come up with that number.
I'm not saying we should be. I'm asking the question, is there, if you're trying to explain to somebody.
Is there a formula? He's looking for a formula that
You would make the
the
assumption
referendum
that
is
a-
designed for 75% of it, or 90%.
You make the assumption that a.
Something that you can explain.
percent-
Right.
If that exists, I don't know.
I don't know.
You make the assumption that the percent of the green report number would be covered under future cash flow from the district. But what that percentage, I don't know.
Now, whether there's a
That's the
talking
obvious
point that we could align on, that we would want to say that, we haven't got that. Now, could we do that before the 7th and 8th? Arguably. But we haven't aligned on that.
Well, that's one of the things why we weren't trying to associate the operational savings to green or to a specific item, because we felt that was also going to be a glossed over point, because people aren't going to get, they're having to tie too many things together for themselves. That's what we were always talking about, was the project cost with a funding capacity of whatever gets determined by the board. There'll be a certain ask for referendum, there's going to be a certain contribution by the district, which is made up of a couple of points. That's yet to be determined, and I don't think we need to necessarily get into that.
Can I ask,
by Tuesday night.
Is that what they did last time? Just so I know what we're fighting against.
No.
Was 198 the cost of it?
That was the bond amount.
Yeah, I know, that's what but I'm just saying, like, was there a number of what that plan was gonna cost?
It was the cost.
That was the cost. Okay, so those two things were the same, so
it's reasonable that someone would conclude that if they had been following it.
Okay.
But nobody saw this kind of a spreadsheet
No.
before,
No.
because I remember just trying to even figure out what was showing in the elementary.
We weren't showing this level of work at forums and public.
Byron is pregnant with a comment.
I'm uneasy with the green report HLS column. And part of that is because we're not sure where that's going to come from. It could be from future revenue, it could be from reserves. It happens to be what in this column is 30-something million dollars, $32 million. It would make more sense to me to have renovations and additions and then a total. And then in a separate panel, the green report HLS. And then you could draw some conclusion, have some discussion about where the funding would come from for the green report. And also I think we need to change the name of that from green report, something that's more intelligible to laymen. And so then you can have a discussion about that, say, this is what the project costs, this is what we didn't already spend before, we're going to try to come up with the money somewhere for that. It could be through multiple sources. But then you get that number, the focus off the number of 172 million onto something that represents what the incremental build would be had I done the work. I guess it's an easier conversation.
You're trying to get to the referendum number.
What's that?
You're trying to get to the referendum.
Well, I think that people are going to
You're pointing out the long-term,
conclude
yeah.
conclude that.
You're
in my
pointing out the
opinion.
long-term maintenance from
Cost
the
over
project
baseline.
cost.
You're
so
saying
that
what's
you're
the cost
looking
over the baseline?
How do we feel about that? I think that's a good suggestion.
I think it's a great suggestion. I also think that it shores up a lot of the question about this, because we're basically, it's a test question. You know, it's not making any assumption about what is or isn't covered at referendum. Yeah, I think
Darren's
it's very.
still shaking his head no.
No, I'm not that, I'm just checking my own whole thing.
Could I ask, at the forum, I wasn't at the last one, does everybody show up initially at the same time, like they're going to a lecture?
Yeah. Yes.
Pretty much,
Okay,
yes.
what would be wrong with somebody that's more knowledgeable than I, that would give a half-hour lecture to the group, and based on what that lady said there, we want to impress the public on all the work that's gone into the plan. This isn't something that was just thought of at the last minute. And then on a side table, show a stack of all the work that went into this. But then, after the lecture, people could get up and look at the boards, but the boards are extremely simple. Just the diagram and maybe just a couple numbers. And we satisfy what people are expecting, that we did the homework and this is what we came up with. It's just not a quick look-see, but they're not going to get lost in the forest of numbers.
No, there was about a 20-minute presentation last time that kind of set the stage for the night, set the stage for the backdrop of what they were going to see and why they were seeing it that way. This will be similar to that, not the same message, but it's going to be that same idea, trying to educate people, understand what they're looking at for the night, what we're asking for them, what we want them to take away from the night. So all that will be laid out up front, and we want that to be incorporated into one or two of the boards as they walk around, so they're reminded of some of those same messages as they're walking through the night.
But in a simplified version.
Yeah, trying to simplify it down to a few highlights.
Something else that would be really cool is if you could just if you could drill down on each of the schools and see what what you're getting for that. in terms of educational benefit and.
Well, it's
So you want
there.
to change the digital to stream?
Kiosk.
It's there, but you got rid of the text, what this plan accomplishes.
Huh?
You got rid of, you had,
Oh, yeah, I did have that on
Something
one of the other,
similar.
I did have that on one of the other versions. You like that?
what this plan accomplishes, unless it's crowding, actually, I think I like this version altogether better.
Yeah, I know.
They didn't like it.
It's not that they didn't like it, it's that they don't think they can produce a 60-inch wide board.
Oh.
So we can't set it up that way. Yeah, that was the feedback from the
What?
group was that everybody liked that one, but Link said that that's not really the way we can go.
We delete
What
some
if you
numbers,
take
What does
one
plan
board
accomplish?
next to another board, which just created a bigger board?
Yeah.
Smaller board, put them together, bigger board. I mean,
they
you know,
are going to
lay
sit
it
next
side
to
by
each
side.
other. They
Yeah,
will.
I mean, if they're sitting next to each other, it just becomes the bigger piece.
Oh, okay.
But if it doesn't crowd it, what this plan accomplishes over your bullets, I don't know, when I first, there was another language, you
Yeah,
know,
I
that
had
was
another
used,
variation.
what we're solving for, there were a lot thrown out, but what this plan accomplishes.
It does help to
All right.
If you like it too.
frame
We need to synthesize this, because otherwise Melissa's head will literally explode. Because we have to go to print when Friday.
Yes, everything, and that means that we have to get it through all the approvals before then too, so that we have to get all the elements put together, get them to Link, Link has to produce the boards, and then we have to route them to our board, to our 2.0 team, so that everybody has had an eye on them. Not necessarily to make a million changes, but just to say, okay, yes, I understand what we're showing at the forums and any sort of red flags.
And we're still using
And they go to
this.
print end of day Friday.
And we're still using this for your helper bees to do this for the 6 plans we walk away with here. The
All right,
text,
so-
Yeah,
what this
those are
plan
walk-away
accomplishes.
talking points.
So we've got a couple $64,000 questions that I've heard swirling around, which is to itemize or not to itemize the schools. I heard passionate statements in favor of both options. Does anybody feel passionately, do people want to do by a show of hands, people who think we should collapse the list of schools and shouldn't show the relative investment in the schools?
So this is to collapse.
To collapse, not to show some sort of dollar amount for each school so you can see the interaction. So we got 4.
To make it about the plan, not the school.
Right.
Well, I mean, I have an example of what it would look like, because I think maybe we're talking
Yeah.
about. It's kind of.
It was very tiny.
See?
We don't need a big board.
Then you could put the other things we wanted on the board on the other board.
Melissa, while he's bringing that up, can I ask, what happened to the ADA on the lower left-hand chart? That was ADA.
Was it missing or was the amount not there?
It's listed as elevated.
It's a version.
But there's lots of other.
There are other.
Can we change that from elevators to ADA then, because?
You know, I was setting up sort of a template, so I just pulled that directly from their sheets. And I didn't see like where it was a broader topic and a number attached. So I just pulled that number.
So we would need to capture that.
And so I would need somebody to tell me what numbers I need to put together for that.
Okay.
So this is not pretty. But, I mean, it would just be this. These numbers aren't right. They're very fast, but you have the renovation of existing green addition, that's a total 171. Those numbers aren't right. And then it shows renovation components and typos, et cetera, but this is what, I mean, collapsing. would look.
That's actually what I
I think
thought
that's
we were
what
gonna
you
do.
need, because anything more
Because
than
then you can
that.
say, wait, we're spending, we're doing renovation and additions, you can at least see what things are, not diving into what each individual school costs.
And if someone wants more than that, they could find it out.
The information exists, again, it's a
Right,
2-hour
exactly.
speed dating to get
Right,
this
yeah.
through and not focus in on
Yeah, this
what's the
does
cost
allow
of
them
right
to
out.
focus on the model and not the numbers.
Well, and I think, as I mentioned, before we leave tonight, we are going to figure out which concepts we're presenting, how we're grouping them, and how we're staffing the groups. And I think it's really important that everyone who's going to be at a particular station take a little bit of a deeper dive so that you can answer questions. If someone has questions about a specific model and you're, I'm freezing too. And if you're, at that station, you should be a little bit of an expert by next
And we would have that data and we could say.
Absolutely.
Sherwood School is getting X in that plan. They can ask.
I'd like the organizing group to come up with a recommendation they give to us before the meetings on how we respond to the question, what about the boundaries? So for example, in this plan, it looks, my point is, I don't know what to say. I mean, I have a pretty good idea what I could say, because I got a pretty good guess of what it might be.
It's a board.
But I want to have somebody, I understand that, but I want, exactly how should we phrase it? Should we say it's a board decision and not say anything, or?
But I understand what you're saying. For the people whose buildings are not being used in the same way, they're going to say, oh, well, where's my kid going to school?
Right, like.
And so you want to be able to give a general.
Well, like where I live next to Lincoln School. It looks to me like in this plan, my kids are gonna go to Indian Trail and then Northwood for middle school, even though Edgewood's only a mile away. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but my point
But
is.
that's not, in this case, like you said, because Wayne Thomas is not being used as an elementary school, the kids would all shift clockwise, and your house by Lincoln would probably go into Ravinia and then to Edgewood.
What I'd like.
So there would be confusion about
My point
that.
is, there's lots of confusion. I want some words. I want you guys to give some words that we should say. What are our talking
What
points
if we
to the
address
question?
that at the opening, we do a brief presentation, what if we address that at the beginning of the evening?
That's
terrific.
To shore up some
Excellent.
questions.
Terrific.
And tell everyone it's a board decision.
It's a board decision, and,
Whatever words you
Decision has
choose,
to be
you
made
decide. Keep words on that.
And frankly, you'll know before you vote.
Right.
Our clock is right tonight, folks. Make a couple decisions.
Guys, one thing.
So,
I have
can
to
we
leave.
do another?
Melissa, excuse me, I have to leave very shortly because my husband's caregiver is leaving. I would like to say you have done an extraordinary job.
Yes.
Yeah, we do need to take a vote on whether or not we want to go with the schools separated out or with more of a collapsed plan like Darren showed us. Do we have a?
Do the show of hands again.
So, second.
Waiting action is on.
So, who thinks that we should go for the more collapsed route? Say,
The one you just put on.
Martinez proposal.
And substitute detail about the plan, benefits.
Less is more.
anybody counting?
No.
15.
There's 22 2.0 people here, so.
15 hands with it.
With the caveat that we will have the information, or we can tell them where to go to get the information if they want it.
Yeah, all of this information is public information. no matter
Right.
what we
You
do.
could have that sheet there, might as well answer it right there, don't push them off, no?
I would know
No,
that
I
she's
would-
there.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to be able to reference materials while we're standing there. I think
All
we're
right,
going to
very
need to
good.
be fully engaged, eye
Sure.
contact.
Very
I don't
good.
think we're going to be able to be like shuffling papers to
Okay.
complete things.
So the vote seems to have gone into the more collapsed version of it then?
That's what it sounds like. Did anybody who did not vote that have a really strong opinion, or are we good?
I want to say why I do have a really strong opinion and just move it along. I think that what we haven't done yet, and certainly won't have time to do, is really look at the drawings and figure out how we might want to change things for a number of reasons. And so these will maintain their relative relationship to one another. And I think we don't want to shine a light on stuff that we haven't necessarily dug into to the degree
Yes.
that we want to.
Right.
And you will
I
have
agree.
informed a ton when people see the aggregate number for the health, life, safety, the physical improvements and so forth.
Okay, we got one vote in.
Okay, we need to determine which configurations we are presenting to this evening.
Wait, do you want to vote on Biden's idea about rearranging the columns to have the green report and HLS out of the total?
Sure.
I thought we were renaming it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, but Biden's suggestion was not just the
Oh,
renaming,
the
but to
pull-outs,
actually
yeah.
list it separately so that it's not part of, so that the 171 number is broken down even a little bit further
Yep.
to
So-
project cost of the long-term.
So the recommendation was, Merrick, was we should show renovation and whatever it calls renovation and additions, a total, which is the total hard costs. And then the green cost would be a separate column next to the total column.
Long-term capital.
Whatever you want to call it. So then at least we're.
And would they say
171 will be-
mandatory?
171 will be there, but it'll include in this case, $30 million of expenses that can be spread out over 15 years or a period of time.
Pull out the long term.
Pull it out from the total.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is the total still for that model 171 or something less?
The total will be 171, but the
But you got the
discussion point will be
subtotal.
140 and change.
Yeah, I actually think that would be worth making in the intro. If we're talking about boundaries, we'd say, you're gonna see some numbers, and it's important to understand what's really, think of as like building and construction costs versus there's long-term, when you do that, then you have to maintain that over time, so there's also a long-term capital. That's a 30-year number, or 20, or it's 10 years.
It's 10 years.
It's 10 years. So one is like the cost of that project to do the building, and then the rest of it is to maintain that for 10 years.
Are those
No, that's not-
mandatory,
that's not right.
the 10-year?
No, it's catch-up maintenance, and my maintenance that's coming.
Or
And
so,
just
when
one-
you say
accelerating
health, life,
stuff you're gonna do
safety,
through
or green,
2025.
is it mandatory spending, or mandatory would be the wrong word?
It's not, no, HLS is a mandatory side, more of a mandatory, the green is not mandatory, but it is capital, you're gonna end up, you're gonna pay the
It's
pipe
not all
rate.
the green, right? Let's
I
just clarify.
just
It's
wanted
just, it's primarily the HVAC, right? Because you're going in, to put the AC in, you've got to change the heating. And that's what that number is. And so if you're going to, you put AC in, you've got to do that work, right? That's chiefly what that is. So there are going to be other green stuff that's not included in this, right?
Yes.
So.
Okay, and then, so in terms of the way the spreadsheet is laid out, all the contingencies and fees and those kind of costs are listed after the green report on the spreadsheet, but so are those part of the project or innovation?
What do we want, gross that up as its own column on the side of that, outside of
Know what
green?
column?
Gross each line item up, don't show fees separately.
No, I know, but I didn't know if they needed to be divided in some way between the green report and the other one, like, because they're for the whole project, right?
The only thing that's not, the only thing for construction-wise gets marked up by contingencies and escalations, but like some of the owner soft costs don't get all those additional,
So those are part of the
markups.
agreement?
So you would do 20.
The green report is marked up with contingencies and escalation and all that.
Yeah, there is a number in that report. So, we pass a motion to vote on his request? Just show of hands, say yes or no.
No motion.
Got a motion, yeah, just show of hands of, all right, somebody gonna, I can't be the one that, what question?
I think it's a good idea, splitting out the long-term piece from the initial capital piece of the green report.
I second that.
Show of hands.
What are we talking about? Sorry, separating
Adopting.
the green. Oh, yeah,
I
separate.
guess I'm just confused because you're going to spend that money up front anyway, right? And it's.
I mean, well, now here's the fundamental question, because last week, when you came back with the revised numbers, all of a sudden, sort of the allocation between renovation and green changed. And you said, well, everything that is included, that would be included in the scope of the renovation if it's part of the green, was sitting in the green column. So if you're taking the green and you're putting it to the right of the total, and are you then doing the same scope of total renovation as you're portraying that you're doing if the overlap is sitting in the green total?
I don't think it could be sitting in the green total if it's part of the scope of the renovation.
But the way the costs are shown on here, they are actually sitting in that column today. So that means they have to go back and redo the allocations and the overlap and move them into the renovation column. You have a week.
Is reality we're dancing around what the total cost is, what the referendum is? I mean, that's really what we're talking about, right? That's what everyone's concerned about, is what people are gonna look at 171 and say, well, it's really gonna be 140 referendum. Is that what we're really arguing about?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the ones that
We don't know that yet. Right.
So we don't know that.
We don't know how much this can cover the green costs, right? If it's
Exactly.
10 buildings, it's going to be less, it's not going to
So
be
we're-
all of it. If it's 8 buildings, it's probably going to be all of it.
What would
We
you
just don't
advocate
know.
for, Dan?
Pardon me?
What would you advocate for?
I would probably just make it simple and just lump it in renovations and additions total.
I thought part of the reason that we were talking about it was to separate out this kind of like, again, I keep bringing up this idea of these past sins or whatever, of like, there's this work that hasn't been being done that still needs to be done,
I
And it
was
is
thinking,
kind of
is there a way that we can call it what it is, which is deferred maintenance?
But it's not all
Yeah.
deferred, I mean, some
Yeah.
of it's.
Can we draw that out, though, that part of this is deferred maintenance and anticipated maintenance, or?
Called maintenance. Well, why is?
Well, maintenance.
Capital expenditure.
And I guess
We're paying
that's-
over 5 years, is that referencing deferred or?
I think,
Well, I think that the question is, in the model we have, is 171 million, just 30 million. If we were to go to referendum with that model, is the referendum going to be 171, 140, or something in between? That's
Something in between.
If it's something in between, then we need to show it at 140, whatever, 141, and show the 30th separate, and in discussion for the forums, a portion of the 30 would be pulled into the referendum. We're just not sure at this point what it's going to be.
But to me, that's disingenuous. So that 30 is not really a variable. That's going to have to get spent.
Yeah.
But is it spent by a referendum? Because it's all people care about.
At
I know,
the
but
end of the
early
day-
childhood
at the
is
end of the
very-
day, you should show the total cost. And you can go back and you can even reference, you can say, look, everyone voted 4 years ago for the 113 referendum. It was a $113 or $120 million project. It was an $89 million referendum. The project cost will be split between referendum and operating costs.
And that's part of why we started right off asking this question about these blue items, because these are items that are variables. These are items that are not must-have.
Right, but if the 171, 140,
It should go down.
come hell or high water, is the referendum number plus whatever gets pulled in HLS. Until we value engineer
That's right.
all that. That is the number, if we're looking at apples to apples, that's the number we're talking about, which is something that the district is not going to come out of pocket over time. It's something that's upfront, the first 4 years, that has to be raised for bond offer. Unless there's some magic that there's.
But that also applies to the green as well.
But that is more variable in terms of what's pulled in from a referendum and what gets pushed out as a future expenditure, which is a 10-year program.
And also the timing of it, and the timing of it too. If we're talking about something that we're gonna do in 2025, if I've got building A, it's got a 30-year roof, and we're, 23 years into that roof, and we know that in year 30, we're gonna replace that roof.
We're not referendum.
That's not a referendum, that's a green reported cost that we would incur regardless of any of these other things. And that would happen in 2025, and that's what we would spend. So I want to be careful that that's not pulled into this. It's great if we can get all sorts of money to do that, but it's also not a priority as far as what's going to happen. It's going to happen regardless, but it's not necessarily part of this project.
But my concern is that we're globally, at least what I'm hearing, bumping in the district contribution is already being accounted for some other part of this. And that money will not be there in 2025 to do the green report work at that time. Because we've already allocated it for.
So you're saying,
part of the package
the
cost.
171 number is the referendum number?
No, it's the project number.
Okay.
Minus whatever you want to deduct out of it. That could be able,
This
it could be
discussion an hour ago. I asked,
That could be-
we couldn't figure out how to get from the whole project to the referendum.
Right.
All right, well, we can't figure it out. I mean,
Yeah, and I guess in your example, let's say we spend $5 million a year out of our operating budget to do that stuff. This roof costs $1.5 million. In 2025, we're spending $1.5 million to do that. Whether any of this ever existed, that's still going to happen.
not necessarily, it doesn't have to do in the past.
But I'm sorry.
It hasn't happened in the past, right?
Well, yes and no. It happened to some extent. It wasn't an all or nothing, but yes. But right. But the point is, and right. So in the past, a lot of times it might have been $80,000 to patch the roof until.
And now it's $1.5 million.
But right. I'm looking at it in sort of in whatever the world is at that point.
I mean,
That's theoretically what's going on.
There's a project cost, and the school district has to figure out how they're going to handle it, right? So we already went through this referendum, but there's also sale of property. There's all sorts of other things that can change with the actual referendum numbers, right?
Right.
So
And that's a conversation with the board down the road.
I agree, but it's earlier. Is there a way to figure some sort of estimation? I think what I heard the answer was
I don't
no.
think we can calculate it, yeah.
Right.
But I think-
So we can. So then let's.
But we can bullet out some of those things. Like we can describe how that might happen in the bullet point above the numbers, or in some way asterisk with the numbers, so that we're not just showing the numbers and letting people draw their own conclusions. We're saying, here's how this number might break down or be paid for, or we might take things out of it, or blah blah blah. Like we have a bullet that kind of describes some of that.
And to that point of, the $1.5 million roof in 2025, and part of the idea of this project is that we're changing our cost structure. So we're going to have fewer, lower overhead, more money for classrooms, more money for operating and maintenance. That's sort of the whole point of this. And so that 30 million to me is a different type of cost than the 140. And yes, it's great to have all of that, but there's a different nature of the pieces. And so to isolate that, I think is important.
I fully agree.
And I think my biggest concern is we communicate in some way that inadvertently breaks trust, right? So that people see the number in a way that they later on see a different number and feel that they were somehow misled or didn't understand something, and then it comes back to undermine the credibility of what we're doing. So that's my biggest concern. So I'm not sure I'm following how we got to that, other than we're itemizing in there, or we put the right kind of description around what that 30 million is to sort of say.
Well,
So
is the
different?
purpose to get to say 141 to say the referendum will be at least 141 plus some portion of the 30 million?
Yeah.
Is that what we're trying to tell people?
Well, it could be less, 141 could go down too. So, but to your example, I think that's what we're trying to get at, which is, it's 171 total. We know that 141 based on this model, the way it's currently costed out, is what is going to be raised from a referendum, because the district doesn't have money to contribute to today's costs. The 30 is something that happens between now and 5 or 10 years. Some of that will be pulled into the referendum, and some will be pushed out beyond the referendum. I think that's what Eric's saying.
Yeah, I mean, so take that example of the roof again. We're not going to bid that out when we have this, when we do what we're doing. Gilbane isn't going to say, well, the cost of that roof in 2025 is X. They're not going to bid that out. We're going to bid that out in 2025 or the summer before, right?
Okay.
So the nature of those costs are different.
But all these green things are all starting up front, though. I mean, the green we're talking about is stuff that's going to be done immediately. It's not stuff. It's not the roof. It's the, say you had to replace the heater in 2025. Well, you're going to do that in 2018 regardless. So it's nothing that.
Why?
Because you're putting HVAC, new HVAC
So
system.
is that then in this case full $30 million, or in this scenario, are things you're going to do immediately?
Yes.
Then it's part of the referendum.
Wait, I want to suggest one possible thing. If we can, is there a way to avoid having this many significant digits? So can we say 130 to 150? Can we say 170 to 185? Is there a way of putting ranges around this to avoid having to go this specific on the numbers?
I agree.
Because then there's wiggle room if there's some change at the architects, there's some extra $5 million we find under a couch cushion when we clean out Green Bay School, whatever it might be.
Baseball
The
cards
artwork
and
is for
baseball.
sale.
But if we can avoid very specific numbers, then there's less to reconcile back to the next time we put out some numbers.
Yes, I agree.
So did we end with green report is for sure separate, and then is it before or after the 171? Like, I think that's where the conversation started. Where we
It's
at?
part of 170.
So it's there.
So in that example, is the roof in 2025, is that being done as part of this project?
The amount would have been accounted for. It'd be done at the end of the project, but yes, it would have been accounted for.
It would be done in the project.
Yes.
And I guess maybe the question is then why, if it's not due until 2025, are we doing it as part of this?
Because we're already, well, the idea was, we've always had that the first 10 years. We can put that back to 5. But the first 10 years are the heavy years, that any operational savings that's been contributed to the project, the total project, is already being accounted for, so you wouldn't have the funds for that second 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, to fund the green and fund whatever would be contribution to the district, or to the project.
Well, that's not necessarily true, though. It depends on what gets raised.
I think there are
Well,
probably
no, not-
items like that that'll be close enough that we can evaluate those as we get into the model in more detail. But there might be an advantage doing it, even though it's 2 years out, you might get a competitive advantage on the bid.
Clearly, there's an advantage. I guess I'm trying to prioritize. So I'm looking at these numbers again, and I'm coming to the same conclusion as a lot of other people, which is to say, people are going to look and say 170 million. I'm walking out the door. You just lost. And so I think breaking down those components and knowing that there's some level of prioritization here is what's important, because I think they need to be able to build those components.
Well,
And so if it is too much, we're cutting from lower priority to say, well, it's more 140 because that's sort of what the amount.
But there's more than just things that will be done in the future. There's also what we just talked about, what we spent a half hour talking about at the beginning of this meeting, that we can cut costs if we need to. For example, use old furniture. I'm just using that as an example. So there's, right.
Same time.
So there's more than just
Where are you
cutting
putting it?
costs of things in the future.
Yeah, where are you putting it? Are you putting it in the green, the long-term capital? Are you putting it into the early childhood here and admin here for the next 5 years, and then do that evaluation at that point? You know,
The
there's options
171
there.
is the not to exceed, it still remains the not to exceed number that loads in all of these. So it's the
Right.
most conservative view, yes?
Yeah, it's not to exceed, but it will absolutely freak people out.
Understood. So we need to convey a range under that is pretty wide, right? So we're trying to be transparent. This is the not to exceed number. If we did everything and rolled everything into the number, this is like the biggest number associated.
And I know that everyone is looking at what these boards are going to look like and getting very anxious, and I really can't stress this enough. We will be very thoughtfully framing the forums with introductory remarks that are setting up how people are going to navigate and come to understand all this information. It's not like we're just throwing them in front of a bunch of boards cold. We're going to explain this to them. So I know that there's a real wariness of putting data in front of anyone, but it's go time. We have to do this.
I mean, I guess when I think of these numbers, and even, sort of what Darren put together, we're sort of asking people to prioritize everything, right? So again, it's the true cost value, and it's, so somebody may look and say, HVAC for 15 million, and I liked it until I saw the $15 million price tag. So I think we're trying to get people to make judgments on this, to get feedback on what that cost value is, and those components are critical to that. So that's why even getting to that subtotal before green, we are going to have to prioritize. We're going to have to really prioritize. And so that feedback to me is critical to understand what do they really want to pay for.
And I like with there, if that means that for the 171, we're talking about the bottom line referendum, maybe 110 to 150. It feels like the range, and then there's attributes of a project which make it 150, which is all this HVAC, the whatever school, the this, that, or there's attributes that make it a 110. But could you go with a range that wide and then get the feedback on that?
Well,
because then you don't have people walking out the door at one. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, you're saying even by component. So AC is 8 million to 12 million.
Maybe that too, but just to say that way you walk up to a board and people may look left and say 110, I'll take it. People may look right 150 and say I take it too. But at least you get the feedback from them instead of having them walk out the door like somebody said earlier.
And it'll be the feedback that will inform the next round of questions, which likely won't be coming from us.
But just to the point about a range opens up the dialogue more than the point estimate, because the point estimate looks like your best estimate, and then also you have to reconcile against that perpetually with the numbers.
Okay, are we comfortable with where we landed on this? As comfortable as anyone is going to be.
I still need to know what we're going to put on the board. We've talked about ranges, we've talked about including green or not, I still need an answer.
So we have a lot of love for the Darren sort of simplified representation of things.
Right,
I guess,
but do we go with a range, or do we go with the numbers?
Put at the end of the day, a
in the spreadsheet?
range around that. Because right now it adds up to 171. So do we have a range internal to each line? Or each cell has a range, or do we have a range at only this total, or like where? How do
I
we?
think
What's
you
the
have to
best
have
way to
it
do the range?
in the columns, and if you're going to have this total, because yeah.
Each column has its own range.
I would also, for the individual components, I would recommend. To me, I sort of think about things that are under 5 million, like small, things that are medium, 5 to 10, things that are big, 10 and up. I mean, if we could just sort of, the less differences in numbers, I just sort of feel like maybe it simplifies it. Eliminate a couple small things, we're all under 5 million each.
They add up though.
What?
They add up. They add up.
No, I understand, but instead of like, this is 8 to 10, this is 7 to 9, this is 5.5 to 6.85.
It's not 8 to 10, it should be 5 to 10.
5 to 10, under 5, over 10.
So can we circle back to kind of put some structure around that?
Yeah.
But so I think what we've landed on is a simplified, not itemized by school, but certainly broken out by renovation versus long-term capital maintenance. And internal to these things have ranges, so there is not a single point estimate, but rather a range that kind of materializes from that. Yes?
How do we get the range?
Huh?
How do we get the range?
By taking all the low numbers and add them up, and all the high numbers and add them. So if each cell has
We'll chat tomorrow.
5 to 10, you
Okay.
take a bunch of 5s and add them up, or you take a bunch of 10s and add them up, and then.
I think
that's the
John
range.
just volunteered to give us those numbers.
We'll chat tomorrow.
I'm gonna need your help because
Well, I mean, I know that there's
It's
been
still-
subcommittees. I just also want to say if
We'll
anyone's
provide the numbers.
if anyone's in a position to help Melissa out on some of this stuff in the next day or two,
Yeah,
let
I mean,
her know.
I don't know if someone else wants to volunteer to put these numbers together, because, you know,
a
we're looking
ton
at
of
the
work.
spreadsheet, like, what I'm trying to hear is, which columns do I need to put together to put on the boards, because we need the boards. So that's
If you
kind of,
share those with me, I mean,
Okay.
probably have to show me the active document.
okay.
So we'll
And then you
populate,
need
we'll get them
partners to write
populated.
what this
and
plan
you'll
accomplishes.
Do the
That's
design.
six
Yeah.
plans.
Are we coming up with the 6 plans tonight?
Yes.
We have.
Okay, so let's,
it's not necessarily.
it's not
six.
necessarily 6, but we need to vote on
Oh,
one.
I'm sorry, I don't know why.
Yeah,
So what
Maybe
we're
you
trying
want
to choose
six.
is,
maybe you want 6.
what are we showing, so how many concepts or which concepts are we showing to the public is the question.
So I hope that those of you who have your materials from last week can refer back to those. We've been looking at, well, we've not yet looked at one of the 9, but we have 9 in front of us. So we don't yet have numbers on 16. At the exec meeting, we talked about the fact that 17 and 20 are awfully close.
These are the two concepts that have the paired schools for Ravinia and Brayside, but those are the only 2 paired schools. The other schools are K to 5 or 1 to 5.
What's the number of that one?
17 and 20.
And 20.
So first, we're not deciding between them, do we want to bring this one forward, is that what you're asking?
Do we want to bring both? Do we want to bring one? Do we want to bring?
So the 2 observations that we want to share for discussion is, one is, those are the only 2 that have a paired school for only one part of town, and everything else is standard. Number 2, between the 2 concepts, number 17 does not accommodate the current dual language census. It only has 6, which would imply capping the dual language program at 6, which is not currently where it's at, 6 sections. Number 20 accounts for 7, which is where we're at.
Which is also consistent with the other configurations. We should probably cross.
All of the other configurations.
There is no other one with 6 in cap?
In DL. So since capping the DL program is outside the purview of 2.0, and those things are very, very similar, our recommendation, based on our conversation with the 3 of us, was we don't need to show both of these. Showing 20, because they're so similar to each other, essentially provides the test case with the idea of having a paired school in one part of town and not anywhere else.
And the dollars are close anyway.
They're almost identical. So we're not gaining a lot by showing 2 of those concepts. So that's the proposal. Does anybody want to argue why we need to have number 17 when it?
Nope,
that
let's show
actually-
20.
okay.
20 is good.
All right, are we?
Moving on.
Do we have to vote?
No, did we vote to show 20?
We haven't done that yet.
No, we're voting to
We're voting
bring 20
17
forward instead of 17 and 20, but then we have to say, are we voting on 20? Do we want 20 at all?
Right, so we wanted to address those 2 separately.
Say that again. We're not substituting, 10 is totally different.
No, we're saying,
17 is gone.
we're saying we don't need both
And
sides.
now-
20.
Right, okay.
So we
Let's
will leave
focus on
20
20.
and it's
How
an
many
option
people
to
want to bring it
evaluate as to
forward?
whether to show.
Question here, is our objective to get feedback on the 20 from this group then? Or is it isn't really to say, well, this is our recommendation, right? It's to say, let's hear what you have to think about it. In that case, I'd say that we'd want to hear whether the community is interested in having just one area of town have grade centers. If none of us here, if none of us here thinks it's a good idea and we don't want to present it, well, then that's a different issue.
But then the other question is, the difference between 17 and 20 is the concept of capping. Do you want to test that with the community, or do you not want to test that?
I don't think it's our fault.
It's not our scope.
Kind of a programming,
Well,
board decision actually, but.
it also implies that you
not
kick one section out of the dual language program, which wouldn't happen, so.
That's the same discussion. Yeah.
Can I make a motion to drop 17 from being
presented.
Yes.
Second.
Show of hands of dropping
Those in favor to
17.
drop 17? Keep your hands up.
Get your hands up.
You mean both 17, we're talking about 17 versus 20? I'm just trying to see the difference between the two.
All right, we're down to 23.
They both have a two section, so.
Did I?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Good, they both have two sections, so I don't like it.
So the next question was the rest of it.
The next question is, are we showing the remaining 8?
Somebody want to make?
What was the next question?
Are we showing the remaining 8 that we had, 17 notwithstanding, the remaining 8 that we had advanced to neighborhood building?
2, 4, 5, 6.
I see.
13, 16.
We
Okay.
still want to show 16?
We're gonna have the numbers. Well, the reason that was even being, besides it being different and being kind of the other extreme, was also a comment to a previous board about showing a middle school campus as a concept.
And it's also, I'll talk about a little bit through the numbers here. It's going to be the most expensive model, we all know that. But it's also the one that saves the most money in the long run.
Which one is it?
16.
We don't have it. It's not done yet.
Right.
But this is the one that, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it broke the model in that we're still cash flow positive through the end of the model that was put together by Dan and team.
Is that, any of that information ever going to come out in the form? Because we're doing this for operational efficiencies, and we can't really speak to any of that.
Well, the financial committee, the financial group, they'll speak to the different models and how they.
So they never factor into the 140 to 170 up there.
But that should be an opening comment. It's so obvious, less schools means less operational costs, but if we don't say that from the get-go, then it may just be too out, we may just miss it.
It would get lost.
It'll get lost.
We did run some numbers on this one with Darren, and it was at 2030, it was like $60 million surplus over the 25%. So it's a tremendously efficient way to run the school district.
Which means we can afford more STEM teachers and we can spend that money along the way. So
Right, that's exactly right. Well, not that, but I mean, it's tremendously efficient. The other ones, I think, is, again, I'm just going to say what I said before, but until we figure out boundaries, and that's something I'd actually like to find out, and I'm going to send an email around about that, what people's willingness is to accept, moving neighborhoods, different places, splitting neighborhoods and things like that. I mean, this one's qualitatively different than all the other models.
You're referring to 16, Dan.
16, yeah.
But which we have no numbers on, but Don, you've seen this, you had a comment on it
And
a
it
couple
won't be
weeks
cheap.
ago.
We have
There is an educational element to it.
It was the
that's
highest ranked
insightful.
educational benefit.
Yeah.
And it was the best, if you look at the 3 prongs of approach, it's referendum cost, educational benefit, and long-term viability. It was the best in 2 of them.
But it goes totally against our survey
Agreed.
results for the
Agreed, totally agree.
the middle school campus.
It's a
It's a
different
middle school
purpose.
campus. It's
Although,
like way
these are not
expensive.
endorsements, so we're not.
I think it's enlightening.
It's to get
So can I ask an existential question? Because we could talk about this for quite a while. They're all interesting concepts. Hey, Helen, can we get your opinion on something here? So we need to make a decision. We could talk about this for a long time. We've got 8, which we've done a lot of work on and kind of advanced, and we have ready to present. Do we want to have a long debate about which ones to take off? No. Or do we want to just put this in front of the public the way it is and get feedback?
I think that's what we should do. I mean, it's too early at this point to eliminate
I'm
something
hearing
like this,
yes.
which.
Motion for it.
Make a motion, somebody.
Yes, I move that we. Sorry.
The only problem with too many is you're gonna spread out all of your data. You're not gonna get enough data points to make a decision. You're gonna have 1/8 of the people are gonna like this one, or you have a majority that's like one, you're gonna have a very small portion.
That is a risk that I think has to be a calculated risk.
But they're not voting. What they're doing is they're putting up notes and they're giving us pluses and minuses that we're going to analyze. So that information across 8 is not gonna be substantially, it's not gonna be worse, certainly. I think we're okay giving a lot.
Here's the difference.
Because they're not voting.
Strong
You have-
signals.
You have a half-hour speech beforehand, an hour and a half to look at 8 models. We understand these models because we've been looking at them for a year.
Right.
These people are going to be coming in cold. It's too many models.
The impetuous and the decisive will still give us their feedback.
What's on the exit?
Yeah, what I don't hear from Darren is how much worse off the feedback would be if we had 7 or 6. And so until you can tell me that we're gonna be like a lot worse off if we have 8 over 7 or 6.
I think there's a risk.
I think it's worth it
Yeah, I
to
think
show
there's a
8.
risk if we cut it back too many. The expectation for the reconfiguration 2.0 is that we're gonna present 3 models or so to the school board. If we cut it down to 4 or 3 right now,
No, we were
It's a
trying like
question of showing
6.
work.
we're looking for strong signals, and we're still gonna get strong signals from the public if there are things that they really.
Showing the work and also letting them like provide input in a really authentic way.
I think we got 8. We've done a lot of work for these 8. I think we got 8.
Because there are components within the 8 that you want to get feedback on. It's not just
Yes.
the model as a
Right.
whole. There's components of that model.
Each one has.
You're a supporter of the
There's a distinction between making cuts within our group tonight or showing a fewer amount of representative models with the statement that we're actually looking at more models, but these are ideas. They're not all the ideas, these are ideas. And if we can maybe show a grade center, a central middle school like 16, and maybe cut it back to make it more, better info on fewer amounts, but we don't have to make those cuts tonight
Well,
within our group.
We don't have to make those cuts tonight, and the
Forever.
next decision that we
Yeah.
need, the next decision that we need to make after we decide how many of these we're going to show is how we're going to group them.
Right.
Because yes, an hour and a half is not a ton of time to look at, it's not a lot of time to look at 2 configurations, frankly, but the way that we organize them, and again, it's a question of framing the conversation. So,
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that we need to make the point that they don't have to say they like this whole model of 16, but that they like the idea of having, a school here and a school there. I mean, they can pick apart the models and make comments on it. I think that
I think that's right. I think it's also really important to remember that we make a lot of assumptions about what the community thinks based on what we heard the last time around, and we're in a different place. And we might be surprised by some of the feedback that we get. So, I mean, I'm, for that reason, in favor of showing more rather than fewer, because we might hear interest or areas of concern that haven't occurred to us yet.
Just as
I'm in
long as
favor of
they're
more
not
to,
too duplicative.
to go to 8, and one of the reasons why is because if we go into 3, it's a number that's going to be sticky, and it's going to be in the paper. 2.0 presents 3 models, and that's going to be, it's going to be a challenge to get around.
E3.
So is there any reason not to show
Yeah.
the 8?
Like, look at 2 and 6. If it's to show components and what do we think of these ideas, none of them should be, like you did with 17 and 20, infinitesimally different. Did I miss something real quickly between 2 and 6?
Very different
Yeah.
costs.
Number,
Yeah.
8 building versus 9 building.
One difference is that you have no monolingual north of Vine in one of them. And I want to make sure that one of the things that we bring out of these discussions, this is why I support 8.
I'm
is
sorry,
I want all
I
of
already
the-
just saw them.
I want all of the objections that we think that we might get to be brought out during the meeting. So if, for example, we don't have an monolingual elementary school in each of the 4 segment areas in the district, so southeast, central, north and southwest, is that a problem? So we need to show models that don't have monolingual north of Vine. For one reason, I think it's going to be a terrible problem, and no referendum will pass if you present something like that. But, that's the kind of thing that we need to test. So the more models, the better, and they show the different examples. You can draw these objections out so that we can deal with them and know what's important and what isn't.
I think there's also a psychological thing that if you have 7 or 8 models to choose from, it's like, oh, public, we trust that you have valid opinions, and we want to bring you a lot of options to get your real opinion, instead of the other feels like you're leading them down a trough that has one result at the end.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, I agree, people don't want to feel that.
So can we get a motion to?
To present 8. Is that what you wanted to say,
Well,
Jim?
I can't, I'm asking.
Somebody's got to do it.
Motion to present 8 models.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now how are we going to group them?
Numerically.
Numerically works. Pleasure.
I had
They're all together.
I had a suggestion that, I mean, basically, it's mostly based off of number of buildings. So 2 and 4 would go together because they both have 8 buildings. 6 and 20 would go together because they both have 9 buildings. And then 5 and 13 would go together because they both involve a new structure to the arrangement of the schools. And that one is a K2-3-5 model. The other one is a K4-5-8 model. And then that leaves us with 16 and 24 together because they are the kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, and so in that way they represent the greatest amount of change and the least amount of change. Put those guys
The
together.
only suggestion from Lynn was not to put them together, don't give them the outliers title already, or just by virtue of how they appear against each other, that you're automatically tagging them some way. You have to get honest feedback.
It sort of bakes in a bias.
Yeah.
Is there
Well, can
any
you
benefit
group,
to low and
like,
high cost?
16 in with like the 13 and the grade configurations, because that strut programming wise is kind of different. You know, you've got every student going to one building for middle school.
We can group them, I mean, we already grouped them based on educational benefit, and then there's costs. So you could look at it that way, which has the greatest educational impact, rather.
Those,
Well, change,
those 3
it's just
already
educational
actually.
change.
Those,
Right, that's one way of doing it, or someone just said cost, which was contrary to what John said that Wing suggested.
5-13, yeah, we could, yeah. Because 5-13 and 16 would be our kind of like pro educational score. Those scored the highest in that frame of reference.
Yeah.
And then 6, 20, and 24, which I guess is pretty much the natural outcome of the other way, are the highest of the community scores. And then 2 and 4 are just kind of.
My question is, do we want 4 stations or 3 stations? Do we want groups of 3 schools together, which would be my editorial, a preference, or do we want stations of 2?
I think you just do the stations that make sense, like, you know, because whatever theme you put to those stations, whatever fits, whatever configuration fits there, I think that.
Well, I guess I'm trying to get away from a theme of the station so we don't have this debate about how they got grouped and we don't artificially tag anything anyway. Just, you're at a station, here's 3 that, maybe that contrast naturally works or doesn't, but I'm just trying to think of our skill set of people we're gonna have at every meeting.
We
have
don't.
to cover.
Has anyone
Just randomly put 2 at each.
No, I'm not saying.
What RSVPs are too?
Just like random numbers, 2 at each.
I'm posing the question.
No, but your implication is to make it random, so then you're not pulling out an answer by comparing 1 and 2, which are similar, with one slight difference, and then all people are focused on is that one difference.
Yeah,
If you have 1 with 5, making the numbers,
Yes.
then it won't be so obvious.
That's the question of the table.
Or like 13 definitely stands alone, what's comparable to 13?
I'm using random numbers.
Nothing we have. Plan 13.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only one that puts 5th grade in the middle school.
Right, so it really,
But then 16 stands alone, 'cause that's the only one that's a single middle school.
well, I think that's
They
correct,
all
so I
have unique
think.
features. I mean, that's part of the
maybe
reason that we are including them in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if we're grouping them for a reason to make the transfer from one group to the next easier on our attendees, then let's come up with that reason. If we feel like that there isn't a way to do that, then let's just do the suggestion of not, in fact, I would say not random, but rather to try and pair them in a way that doesn't necessarily make a theme of a group. Because we just said, if we did it random, then 16 could end up with 24 and we have to go back in there.
Well, and the other piece is if they're really similar, and if someone has a very strong reaction for or against once, it's going to really drive their response to the other.
Yeah.
So I think
Really?
having some kind of contrast within each station has some benefit there, because there's also like a little bit of like productive tension for people to read things against each other at a particular station.
Because you're right, if you were to group the ones I actually confused by quickly looking at it, the 8-building school with the same middle schools, but in one Ravinia is open and Wayne Thomas is closed, the other one is Wayne Thomas is open and Ravinia is closed. That was the one I said, why do we have these two? I couldn't even pick up initially, or didn't recall initially.
Well-
If you group those together, it's a disaster,
Well, and the other thing that
even though they're similar.
that forum participants will have that we don't have the benefit of right now is they won't be looking at this, they'll be looking at the boards, which bullet out the motivation, the kind of underlying impulse between each model.
What the
So,
plan accomplishes.
So can
But I think to go through 8, it's actually more efficient to have them together, and it's sort of the curator or whoever
Well, that's what
standing
it
next
would
to it.
be.
It's your job to be like, okay, like if you get this one, you get that one, and it's just a switch of the schools.
Do we have an RSVP count? Does anyone know what Nicholas has?
I do not have ours.
I mean, is it 100, is it 200? Nobody knows.
I do not.
So I think
And that was
that,
that, the most people don't know RSVP.
oh, so RSVP is not
and the mailer
indicative?
just came to my
How did
house
it happen last time?
yesterday, so a lot of people are just looking at the mailer.
I still didn't get my
I
mailer.
need to get mailer.
I didn't get mail either.
Well, the
There.
reason I asked is, as far as space planning, that has something to do with it too.
There's a lot of space in the room. We're not gonna be short on space, and I think that once we get in there, we're gonna let Link own that piece
Okay,
in terms of setting.
in which case, if we think a lot of people are going to be there, you have to create stations in a way that many people can look at a single plan, and that's a reason not to put them together. Because if the two plans are like this, and 20 people are trying to look at it,
They can't see
as
it.
opposed to two like this, and 20 people are trying to look at it. In other words, maybe you need to leave enough space around each plan if you can staff it.
Well, that's the practical consideration, which is that we don't
Well,
want to
what's your
spread out.
feedback on staffing so far? How many
But
do
if
you
you
have?
have a person.
It's not just how many we have, it's how many who can be
So we got the
interested.
blend of people that can speak to different parts of the.
Right,
Well,
so
we know who our
just
people
in, at first glance, in terms of availability and participation, I would say that, and I apologize in advance if I overlook someone who's a total dynamo in a certain field, because these are a lot of areas of expertise and names to keep track of. But at first glance, it occurred to me that Mark, Ann, and Brian, who are all three available for both nights, could bring the kind of financial chops to 3 stations. Which is a stupid way to make a decision on how many stations, but I'm just.
Ann also offered.
I said
Yeah,
Ann.
she said.
Oh, you said Mark and Ann.
Mark, Ann, and Brian.
And Brian.
But we also
But we
have
have
a
the
finance
finance,
station.
yeah, we have the finance station too.
That needs to be.
I thought that was finance.
Is finance a separate station?
Yeah.
I thought they were the finance station.
They are the
We're
finance.
talking about the plan station, so your point is correct.
We're getting to 9:30, folks, so it'd be nice to try to wrap this up this evening and get some sleep for everybody.
So how many stations are we having?
I think we need more than one.
Target stations, outlet stations.
How many?
The sweets table.
I thought we were talking about breaking the 8 models into a
Yeah,
number of
so the
stations.
8 models are either 3 stations or 4 stations. So we either have 4 of 2 or 3 of.
Plus we have a finance station.
Plus we have the
plus
finance
a
station and we have like the process info station.
We have
So if we can group them in groups of 3, then we have a total of 5 stations.
But we said we don't actually care how they're grouped, so that makes it easy. So we just make 3 groups.
I
Well,
think
it's
you're
not that we
right.
don't care how they're grouped.
No, but we-
wanna-
we don't feel like we
wanna
need to
group them in
theme
an
them.
overly determined way.
We don't feel like we need to theme them. Okay. So
It's
we're gonna
done.
take these 8 and we're gonna
That's
put
for
them
the
into.
Barnettsville with the sweet stapling.
We just need to take the 8 and make 3 groups out of it.
Yes.
And we don't care so much so that as long as we don't put the highest and lowest together and we don't make there feel like there's a theme.
And can we,
Yeah, we should delegate
can we
this.
flip the room the second night, so in case there's room bias, like you're tired by the time you get to the third room?
Well, people will spend the most time at the nearest.
At the nearest station, so we either have.
That's a late job,
That's
so
a
they
late
did that, the March forums, they made some, they were
switched it.
monitoring
They switched it
and they
around?
switched things up.
Okay.
That's why they get the big bucks. So, 3 stations, and I forgot, so there's also finance as a standalone.
So we would have a total of 5. If we did 3 stations of configurations, then we would have a total of 5 stations, because we also have our info station, and that's where we show boards from last time about the challenges, also our process. That's where we have the 2 mailers, and then the
That's where you
finance
show
station.
And Art just asked an important question, which I think reflecting on what March looked like is worth, like,
The process station.
Art asked, what's the point of the finance station?
Oh, so the difference is that we want to have the project cost at the model station, but we want to be primarily talking about the models, how they function. The finance station is more about fund balance, operational stuff, what it looks like in the future, the chart that, I should have Mark talk about this. The boards that Mark wants to have at the finance station are more similar to what we had at the finance station before than they are.
Does it need to be manned?
Yeah. There was a lot of discussion at the finance station.
A lot of
Mark's excited about it.
If I can help, I'm happy to be in one of the.
There will be vandalism at that
So
table.
that's for
We're not going to have any new information at the finance station, we're not going to have information on specific configurations about operating costs in the finance station. Why do we really need it?
For people to talk about what makes the referendum, the bond rates, the tax rates, for the people who really want to talk about the numbers.
Didn't we do that last time?
Yes.
Well,
But
but
those
before there
people
would be,
probably
what
do
if we
that.
just skip that conversation this time, would there be any loss?
Right.
Well, we'll try to have it at the other stations, I think is the idea.
I think it would be nice to have some of the roaming posters.
So if you break the finance people who man their station out to the other stations, they can answer those questions at the other stations.
And they can have a green dot on their name tag.
Well, but we have the board with the referendum amounts from last time. We have a board with a chart that Mark wants to use. We have, I mean, there are boards that are specific to
We're gonna have
the
a
finance
monitor set up
station.
again, so they could actually run the model for people if they want to actually.
Is it kosher? Dan said that he's willing to help. Is it kosher to have a board member involved in this?
Yes.
The Bible doesn't talk about that.
Yeah, it's an open meeting.
And 2.0 is a living religion.
I understand what you're saying. I think that most of the attention is going to be on the configurations and not the finance section.
But for the people who want to do a deeper dive on the finance, we need to have a place for them to go. So that they're not
Monopolizing
Can we
the
just call that the
configuration.
And Art, it's the same reason why we have a state of the district station. For those people that weren't there the first time around, that didn't get that information, we're bringing them up to speed. So we're constantly repeating ourselves because we don't know what stage of the process somebody comes in at.
right.
I know, 20% overlap between 2 crowds.
We are here, folks. It's 9:30, we got the data we needed. Thank you for that. I know it's a rough exercise, but we're gonna have a challenge our next go around, we start looking to reduce models. So it's a good test of even trying to make decisions about parts of this process. So thank you for that.
Ryan, are you gonna send out a thing saying, here's a table you're assigned to, or you'll just find out when we show up?
Can we do this on our own, or is this a decision that needs to be made as a group?
I'd recommend that the chair just assign people.
Yeah, that's just logistics.
Logistics issues.
I just want to end, I missed the first hour, sorry I'm late. I just want to say that when we're at these stations, it'd be great to ask people, what do you like about these things? I know we can easily get the what you don't like, but don't forget that question, what do you like about this also?
I also think
I
it's
asked them
really.
to put it up there, though, don't editorialize the.
What do you like is not an editorial question, but yeah.
How you hear it.
Making
Yeah.
sure they, right.
Yeah. Tell us what you like about this also, because it's so easy just to take, I hate this, I hate this, I hate that.
He's right.
But is the feedback board split into what you like and what you don't like, or is it?
No, we said not to
we
do that.
decided not to do that.
And
We
again,
didn't
can
want to
we,
steer it.
before we get assigned a station, can we get, because I know they're gonna be numbered A, B, C, D, whatever, can we get the corresponding letters to go along with these numbers so that we can study them?
We're talking.
I appreciate your desire to study them.
I don't know.
And can I also, I mean, this should actually go without saying, but none of this should be circulated outside of the
Yes.
committee prior to the forums. Period, end of story. I mean, that's, like, everyone wants to see it, everyone's itching to see it. It's not ready until it's ready, so.
Are we meeting on Monday? Okay.
We
Is that
are,
it?
it's not on my calendar.
Yeah, it is on my calendar.
Yes, we have
No,
to
it's
say.
on your calendar and it's on my calendar too. I like mentally blocked it, like looking at my calendar. I can, Helen, and that's
Never
not
trust
all.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you need to have that
I'm
meeting?
off this committee.
Eric brought up a point, which this comes out based on the calendar. I guess with graduations that night, we're gonna lose the vast majority of everybody here to other events.
What
Wait,
night
what
is
night?
graduation?
Monday the
What
5th.
would the agenda be?
High school graduation?
It would be to finalize any prep work for the
The one I
year.
can look at.
No, it has high school schedule.
8th graders.
Oh, 8th graders.
Do you all feel like there would be value in coming in for a short working meeting on Monday night? Short?
Long.
Short. I said short, for a short working meeting on Monday night to break out into your groups, see all of the material and kind of
Can we do
Do
the
a
same
little
thing by
practice.
just getting there early on Wednesday?
the early on Wednesday is a challenge for a lot of people.
I find the benefit of Monday would be to, if somebody comes up to me and says, what's the point of this model? Give me the 12-second salient explanation of it, so that we're kind of
We scrum
consistent in what
basically
it
on
is.
Monday
What's the
night,
deal
yeah.
with this? Just to get a good look at all of them again.
No, we should have at least, even if they're not hard images in our hands at that, but at least have digital images.
Well, and I like
So
the
you're
idea
gonna
of
do that,
having
someone's
like
gotta-
our staff per station being able to group together. and
Break
have-
out and just do some workshopping.
But if you're gonna gather, I mean, everyone can make it on Monday, so you need to write that down to give it to the people that aren't gonna be there.
Yeah, sure.
No, I mean, let's say that by the end of this week, we will figure out how we're staffing these stations. And then Monday we'll practice and everyone will get, it's funny that we said practice, it's like a little rehearsal. We'll make sure everyone has materials and then whatever. Any other business?
For those of you who did not receive the mailer, a number of them did hit homes yesterday, so you should be getting it in the next couple days or maybe today. Here it is, yeah, that's what it
It's
looks
awesome.
like.
Is there a
And-
PDF available?
What's that?
A PDF that for friends who didn't get it, we could email
Yeah,
something.
yeah, I'll get that from Link.
Should put that up on our website.
It's a fabulous piece. And then the forums are on the back, but still keep talking to people. Because I'm talking to people, they don't know.
Motion, are we done? Ronnie, are we
Can I
done?
get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Aye.